Superman's journey through the worlds. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, First Encounter. New York during World War II. In a dimly lit movie theater, a black and white war mobilization advertisement was presented to everyone before the movie was played. Whether it was admiration or disdain, everyone was staring at the screen, and no one noticed that a foreign visitor who did not belong to this land suddenly appeared in the corner seat that was originally empty. Lincoln fell into silence as he heard English constantly in his ears and looked at the face with distinctive features under the blurred light and shadow. The previous second he was still sitting on a soft sofa chair, and the next second, he inexplicably appeared in this movie theater with a distinct style of the last century. And what's worse is that the place where he appeared was actually a foreign country. Black and white pictures, war mobilization advertisements, and then looking at the thin young man who was dragged out by a tall and strong gangster by the collar, he instantly understood his situation. One coincidence is normal, and two coincidences can also be explained, but 3, 4 or even more coincidences generally only appear in fantasy works. Although the world he is in now is indeed a fantasy work, Lincoln could not appreciate the black and white movies of the last century. After a moment of silence, he stood up and left the theater when no one noticed him. The moment he walked out of the movie theater, Lincoln felt that countless eyes were staring at him. It was because of his clothes that did not belong to this era and his oriental face that attracted many people's curious and questioning eyes. Lincoln's face twitched twice, and he lowered his head to cover his face and quickened his pace. In a few steps, he walked out of the cinema and onto the street. The sunlight penetrated the clouds and shone down. It was not bright, but the moment it touched Lincoln, a strange power was born in his body. From bones to skin, his body was transforming from the inside out, just like a piece of pig iron that was constantly burned and forged into a piece of refined steel. This is. Lincoln's eyes were full of strange brilliance. He rolled up his sleeves and looked at the gradually smooth muscle lines, then looked up at the sky hanging high in the sky. Superman's ability? With a hint of joy and expectation in his heart, he swept his eyes across the crowd and finally focused his eyes on a wall. He focused his eyes slightly, trying to use his perspective to see through the thick wall. But as his eyes and attention continued to focus, before the wall was completely seen through, he noticed a dark line after another. A faint golden light floated on one of the gray lines, gradually dyeing it into gold. In the dark, Lincoln had an invisible feeling. Dyeing that line completely, he could pluck the string to go to the next world. Although the dyeing speed was a bit slow, at least there was hope. He estimated that he was a Superman, but compared to being a Superman who maintained world peace for many years, he might be more suitable to be a motherland or even an ancestor. The golden line was a good opportunity. Lincoln drew his attention away from the golden line that took some time to blur. He easily saw through the thick wall. Not only that, the moment he saw through the thick wall, he also heard the sound of fists hitting flesh. Looking at the thin figure who was repeatedly knocked down, but stood up again with determination, Lincoln pondered for a moment and walked into the alley. Enough. Grabbing the hammer that was about to hit Steve again, Lincoln gently waved his hand and threw the American to the ground. Looking down at the man with a hint of resentment in his eyes, Lincoln chuckled and clenched his fists. "Do you need me to practice with you?" The man struggled to get up from the ground, looked at Steve whose clothes were stained with dirt, and then looked at Lincoln who was obviously not easy to deal with. A hint of anger flashed in his eyes. "You'd better watch your little friend." "Really?" Lincoln reached out and picked up the uneven garbage lid and bent it casually. With a creaking sound of twisting, the hard metal lid was rolled into a ball of garbage by Lincoln. Tossing the heavy metal garbage in his hand, Lincoln looked at the stunned man with a half smile. "Do you want to become like this too? You. The man's eyes were full of disbelief. He stuck close to the wall and moved outward inch by inch until he rushed out with a "Wow, monster, monster." Unlike the panicked man, looking at Lincoln's typical oriental face and the iron shell that had been squeezed into a ball, Steve had other bold guesses in his mind. "Is this kung fu? Can you tell me how to reach this level?" "This is not kung fu." Lincoln shook his head and threw the iron ball into the trash can. As for the method, do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer long distance run every day. Don't turn on the air conditioner in winter or summer. Stick to it for 3 years. Maybe anyone can reach this level. Steve didn't understand and just took it as a joke from Lincoln. He straightened his clothes and extended his hand solemnly. "Steve Rogers, you can call me Steve." Lincoln glanced and stretched out his hand with a smile. "Hello Steve, my name is Lincoln." "Lincoln?" Steve's eyes changed. "This reminds me of a great man." "Maybe." Lincoln did not comment. At this moment, James Barnes, Bucky, in military uniform suddenly appeared behind the two of them. "I think maybe I'm not needed here anymore." "No, you came at the right time." Steve looked at his longtime friend Bucky and smiled. "This is my new friend, Lincoln. He helped me a lot." "Lincoln?" As expected of longtime friends, Bucky raised his eyebrows in almost the same way as Steve. "This reminds me of a great man." "Unfortunately, I'm not the great man you think." Lincoln shook hands with Bucky and smiled. "But I will definitely become a famous person. I can guarantee that." After that, he waved to the two of them. "I can see that you seem to have something to say. You chat first, and see you next time, if we are lucky." Without giving the two a chance to stay, Lincoln's figure quickly disappeared. Bucky looked away, with some deep thought in his eyes. "I think he is not simple." Steve looked at the trash can beside him and nodded. "I think so too. I wonder if he will join the army. The possibility is not very high." Bucky shook his head. "His shoes are very special. I have never seen them before." "Shoes?" Bucky mentioned a detail that Steve had not noticed. He thought about it for a while and then gave up this futile behavior. It was not until this time that he noticed Bucky's green military uniform, and his face immediately became solemn. "Did you receive an order?" Note: chapters 35 to 38 were banned because they wrote about the anti-Japanese war and could not be released. Similar plots will not be written in the future. Chapter 2: I heard I can borrow money here. Helping Steve was just a casual move on Lincoln's part. It's not common for a hero to save a beauty, and the beauty he saved was a real beauty. The future Captain America, known as America's Hips, won't encounter this too many times. Knowing Steve doesn't mean Lincoln's situation will get much better. The increase brought by sunlight is continuous and continuous, but time is always the most important factor. Too short a time has prevented him from being fully enhanced. Up to now, most of the sunlight has been spent on enhancing his physical fitness. The external manifestation is that all abilities based on his body are increasing. Defense, size, speed, strength, senses, etc. In terms of physical fitness alone, he has surpassed most normal humans in the world, but because the focus in the early stage was on physical enhancement, he has not yet obtained abilities including biological force fields. It is also possible that he already has them, but they are too weak, so he has not yet noticed and knows how to use them. Without the bio force field, he couldn't fly, nor could he contain the huge noise and destructive power that might be caused by speeding. This forced him to shuttle through the streets like Tuxie, avoiding the New York police who might question him. The status of Chinese in the United States at that time was not very high, and with his dress that was ahead of his time, he would definitely become the target of those New York police. He tried to find a way to integrate himself here, at least to have an identity that would allow him to go out on the street and buy coke openly. Computers had not yet been invented in this era, so the information recorded in paper documents could be tampered with in various ways, but precisely because the information remained on paper, it might be more laborious to tamper with a living person than in the era of computers. At least, Lincoln couldn't do it now. After thinking about it, he finally locked his target on the local Chinese gangs. Perhaps these fellow villagers could bring him some help. Join the army? Are you serious? Lincoln looked at the fellow villager with black and yellow teeth in front of him with an expression like an old man on the subway looking at his phone. "I don't even have an identity. You want me to join the army? I'm walking into a gun. What's wrong with being an illegal resident? There are many illegal residents here. As long as you join the army, I will find a way to get you in. When you come back from the war, no one can find fault with that little card." I tell you, this opportunity is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If it weren't for those Americans mobilizing the whole country to recruit soldiers, it would be difficult for you to join, even if you wanted to. Think about it. After saying that, the fellow villager patted Lincoln on the shoulder and passed by him. Obviously, he had a lot of business. The back of the fellow villager gradually walked away, and Lincoln sat there and fell into deep thought. He was already tempted. What he wanted now was actually very simple, just an identity certificate, which would prevent him from being questioned endlessly because of his identity. As a modern man, he is basically inseparable from the convenience brought by human society. If possible, he would rather bask in the sun leisurely in a group society than run after the sun like a savage in the wilderness. It would be fine if he couldn't enjoy life before he gained the ability, but if he still can't enjoy it after he has gained the ability, then hasn't he gained the ability in vain? Going to the battlefield of World War II to get a legal identity is too easy for him. With a body of steel, he doesn't have to worry about the risk of death. It has only been a short while since he came to this world, and his body has been strengthened to the point where it can resist bullets. After some time, it will probably take a nuclear bomb to kill him. Without worrying about his life, he doesn't mind seeing what the battlefield looks like. Of course, the more important reason is that this is the first world after all, and he wants to mix up some plots for fun. As if he could see what Lincoln was thinking from his eyes, the fellow villager came up to him again with the wine glass in hand. How about it? Have you made up your mind? Sure. Lincoln looked at him deeply. Tell me, what do you want? The fellow villager grinned, revealing a mouthful of big yellow teeth, and rubbed his fingers. I want this. How much? Not much. 25 is enough. 25. Lincoln looked at him and snorted coldly. Are you bullying me because I don't know prices? This can be called robbery. Hey, you have to think positively. The fellow villager patted Lincoln's arm. My 25 includes the cost of getting a fake identity for you and sending you into the army. It's not much anymore, and I'm giving you a discount because you're from the same hometown. What a discount. It must be 12% off. Lincoln, who knew very well that it was common practice to cheat fellow villagers and shoot them in the back, looked at the man in front of him and snorted in his heart, but he still nodded. Okay, 25 is 25, but if you cheat me, I will spend another 25 to buy a gun. As the saying goes, if you are stunned, you will be scared to death. Lincoln's posture stunned the fellow villager for a moment, and then a smile appeared on his face. There are so many people here, how can I be greedy for your money? Don't worry, as long as the money is in place, things will be easy. As he said, he lowered his voice a little. Then, when are you going to pay? Wait a minute. Lincoln glanced at him. Do you know where any famous gangs live nearby? I know, it's not far outside. The fellow villager, who was suddenly diverted to the subject, pointed to Lincoln in a direction with some confusion, and then saw Lincoln walk out. The doorbell rang in his ears, and he finally realized what Lincoln was going to do. A newborn calf is not afraid of a tiger. Here comes another one. It seems that there will be another dead person in the trash can in the alley. Lincoln was not interested in what the tavern owner was saying. His attention was now completely focused on the local gang. He was too familiar with this. He didn't know how many real-time travelers made their first pot of gold by cheating on each other. Now, he was going to do the same. Thanks to the high-intensity study in high school and the pressure of the Set 4 and Set 6 in college, coupled with the blessing brought by the continuous enhancement of learning ability due to the sun, Lincoln did not feel the pain of illiteracy. He successfully found the station of the local gang and was stopped by a gang member with a bad face as expected. What are you doing here? Lincoln pondered for a moment, looked up and said, I heard that I can borrow money here. Chapter 3 Repairman. Borrow money? As if the keyword switch was triggered, the gang member looked Lincoln up and down carefully, and then looked at the crowd who had not noticed the situation here at all, and he immediately became aware of it. Borrow money? Expect a nation to pay back the money? It is better to sell the person directly. No risk and quick money. Why bother borrowing money? Just like Lincoln was ready to play a black eating black game, the local gang he found was also ready to eat people without leaving any bones. When the door behind him closed with a click, the originally quiet room was immediately filled with the smell of monsters. Looking at the gangsters who approached him with ill intentions, Lincoln immediately realized what they wanted to do. He was ready to play a black eating black game, and these people were ready to do a no-cost business. It was a tit for tat, and they collided directly. Lincoln moved his feet quietly twice to make sure everyone was within his observation range. He loosened his clothes and looked at the crowd in the room calmly. "Before we start, does anyone want to leave? Get out of here," someone shouted, and then the originally quiet room was noisy, and the crowd rushed towards Lincoln from different corners. In the closed environment, they were full of confidence and had no intention of using guns. Instead, they rushed forward with simple repair tools such as crowbars, wrenches, and steel pipes. In their opinion, 2 fists cannot beat 4 hands. Even if Lincoln is a nation who is proficient in kung fu, he will have to be knocked down here by them today. They are sure to win this deal with no cost. At the table behind the crowd, seeing Lincoln's figure being covered by the surging crowd, the gang leader Kyozi couldn't help but laugh. "Want to make a bet? How long can that guy last?" the boss said, so there was no reason for the younger brother not to follow. $1. "I bet he won't last half a minute and will lie on the ground like a dead dog." "Half a minute, too long. I bet 10 seconds. 19. Bang. As several people were talking and laughing, a figure fell from a distance and smashed the table in front of them with a bang. Looking at the younger brother spitting blood in the debris on the ground, Kyozi knew that this man would not survive. He looked at the crowd with a frosty face, and then saw that Lincoln, who he had expected to be vulnerable, was like a god descending from heaven. His punches and kicks were all powerful. A casual and inconspicuous punch and palm strike could easily knock a poor guy to the ground. Whether he could get up was completely determined by whether the god of death was on duty. On the other hand, their subordinates, although they wielded steel pipes, crowbars and even wrenches vigorously, could not break Lincoln's defense at all, and could not even make him frown. In less than half a minute, the ground was indeed full of bleeding and groaning people, but Lincoln was not among them. Looking at Lincoln's calm face, Josh's eyes twitched quickly. He had the idea of retreating in his heart, but when he moved his body, the heavy weight on his waist made him feel much more at ease. His hand quietly touched the handle of the gun, and he sneered at Lincoln. "You who broke into my place and beat me, you are dead today. I will pour cement into you and sink you to the bottom of the sea." Really? The perspective allowed Lincoln to clearly see Josh's action of taking out the gun in the dark, but this did not make him afraid. "You come and try it." "Humph." Josh snorted coldly and stood up. At this moment, he took out his pistol and aimed at Lincoln. "If I say you are dead, you are dead. Kneel down and surrender now. Maybe I can leave you a whole body." Greed and the confidence brought by the gun blinded Josh's eyes. He felt that Lincoln, who knew kung fu, would definitely be able to sell for a better price. However, what he did not expect was that the barrier he relied on could not make Lincoln feel a little afraid. Facing the black muzzle of the gun, Lincoln smiled slightly, looked around, picked up a wrench from the ground, weighed it twice in his hand, and then looked at the gang leader. "I think your brain is broken, and I happen to have tools in my hand. Come, I'll help you fix it." As he said, he took a step and walked towards the muzzle of the gun. "You don't know whether to live or die." A trace of coldness flashed in Josh's eyes, and then without any hesitation, he pulled the trigger. Bang, 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 bang. The gunshot roared, echoing in the room even louder. The gunshot and gun flame stimulated Lincoln's nerves, and in an instant, the world slowed down. With superhuman reaction speed, he could clearly see the yellow bullet spinning out of the muzzle, slowly coming towards him in a straight line. Too slow. With a relaxed smile on his lips, Lincoln reached out his hand, pinched 2 fingers, and lightly picked up the bullet from the air. The threat was lifted, and the world returned to its proper flow speed. The sound of ding dong dong rang out, and Josh was completely stunned as he watched the bullets caught by Lincoln fall to the ground one by one. He stared blankly at the bullet head, then at Lincoln, with visible panic in his eyes. He was scared. He was really scared. It was the first time he met someone who could catch bullets with his bare hands, which was completely beyond his expectations. He felt that he should have met Superman in the comics, and maybe he became the target of Superman's chivalrous outing, but he couldn't understand why Superman was Asian. The thought flashed through his mind many times in an instant, and with fear and despair in his heart, he pulled the trigger one after another and fired all the bullets in a swarm. But just like before, no, it was even worse. Josh watched Lincoln's palm waving like a phantom, and the sound of clanging and collision rang out, and the bullet was ejected, as if it had encountered a steel plate. In the dark, he seemed to hear the prompt sound of the attack failed to penetrate the enemy's armor. He threw away the iron block in his hand that had run out of bullets and tried to find a new weapon, but he heard a sound of wind and Lincoln's figure stood in front of him in an instant. In the last second of his life, he only saw the shiny wrench getting closer and closer. Or thoughts suddenly flashed through his mind. I should have lent him money earlier. Although the money may not be returned, at least his life will not be lost. Bang! The skull exploded. He yelled, wiping the bloody wrench in his hand clean. Looking at the messy, but unexpectedly clean room, Lincoln smiled knowingly. Picking up the bullet with his fingerprints on the ground, Lincoln took the repair award given to him by the gang members and left the room through the back door. This is a perfect repair operation. No one can expose him. Please call him the repair master. Chapter 4. The Birth of a Captain. In the tavern, the fellow villager snorted twice. He was thinking that Lincoln's business should be ruined, but before he finished drinking the wine in the glass, a blood-stained $25 was slapped on the table in front of him. He looked up at Lincoln, then looked down at the coin, stained with hot blood, and his face twitched a few times. He has been here for some time, and has seen some gangs and individuals who don't follow the rules, but he admits that this is the first time he has seen someone like Lincoln. He found out the address of the gang and then went to get the blood-stained US dollars. He didn't change his face and was not injured. This fellow villager is a ruthless person. The fellow villager looked at Lincoln carefully, and his contempt for Lincoln was completely put away. A man can't stand firm without being ruthless. After seeing Lincoln's ruthlessness, how many people dare to look down on him? He thought Lincoln should have experienced a bloody battle, but in fact, Lincoln did it much easier than the fellow villager imagined. When he left with the banknotes stained with the blood of the villains, he could confidently guarantee that there was no witness to this operation, unless the dead and vegetative people could get up again. No clues, no witnesses, unique methods, and the inability to accurately lock the scope of the suspects. Just based on these points, this bad case is enough to become an unsolved case. The fellow who runs the tavern may be able to provide some useful clues to the New York Police Department, as long as he is willing to take the risk of being killed if Lincoln is not caught. But it is obvious that this fellow who is desperate for money is a smart man. He will not do such a thing, which also means that Lincoln is safe. Not only is it safe, but the corpse is on the ground will also make the fellow put away some thoughts that should not be there, prepare an identity for him, and send him to the European battlefield. He took the money, Lincoln got an identity, the New York Police Department cracked down on criminals, and the residents of New York got a stable life. Except for the local gang that had been doing evil for a long time and was able to survive safely, but was inexplicably wiped out. Everyone was very happy. The fellow's tavern was obviously not suitable as a place to live, but that didn't matter. In the huge city of New York, there were many places willing to give a little help to a foreigner who had lost his ID card for the sake of money. After all, the US dollar at that time was still called the US dollar, which was the kind of gold that could be directly exchanged for gold. Professional matters should be left to professionals. Lincoln didn't know how the fellow operated, but a few days later, he brought him good news. This is your stuff. Take it. As if he was guilty of something, the man looked around and took out a paper envelope from his arms and handed it to Lincoln. As for joining the army, you have to wait for a while, and you will receive a letter then. Letter? Lincoln pondered for a moment and pointed to the ground. Send it here? Send it to me. The fellow said, then it will be delivered to you, so you'd better stay in a place where I can find you. How long will it take for me to get the letter? That's hard to say. The fellow pondered for a moment. It depends on the efficiency of those Americans, but it will not exceed a month at the latest. I heard that the situation over there is not very good. The fellow's words had some other meanings. If Lincoln could take out a banknote at this time, he might be happy to reveal some information to Lincoln. But seeing that Lincoln was unmoved, the fellow knew that he had encountered a pixie and left in boredom. Lincoln was not interested in the so-called intelligence he mentioned. Just think about it. What kind of information can a Chinese who runs a tavern have that is worth Lincoln's attention? At present Lincoln's main concern is not the war situation on the European front, but the super soldier enhancement plan that the Strategic Science Corps in New York City is preparing to carry out. To be honest, he is very interested in the super soldier serum. Although that thing is of no use to him, it can at least serve as an iconic collection. After sending the tavern owner away, Lincoln returned to the room and swept the newspaper with the words "Tomorrow's World Expo" printed on the table into the trash can. Lincoln picked up the Coke in the glass bottle on the table and blew it gently. Crack crack, fine freezing sounds sounded, and the originally room temperature Coke instantly turned into a bottle of iced drink. His body's ability to absorb and enhance sunlight is beyond imagination. Now he has all the abilities of a Superman, including but not limited to biological stance, super strength, super speed, thermal vision, freezing breath, supervision, super brain, etc. His eyes can now see the composition of matter in a microscopic way, but he usually does not use this microscopic vision ability on humans, because once he sees bacteria and mites at a microscopic angle, he feels that his life experience will be greatly reduced. As the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. As long as he doesn't see it, he can pretend that nothing exists. As for super intelligence, it can bring an advantage of crushing IQ, but it will also make things boring. When he can analyze and judge the changing trend of things at a glance, the short-term future will not be unknown. The experience of near omnipotence, brought by powerful power, will quickly deprive him of the joy of experiencing life. So he has imposed certain restrictions on the super brain. He can exert the powerful intelligence of the brain at certain special times, but under normal circumstances, he is still himself, an ordinary person with superhuman abilities. In this way, he can have more fun. The 1 month given by the tavern owner is the longest time limit, but Lincoln himself does not care about it, because it is very close to June 22nd, the day when Steve will undergo super soldier transformation in the Brooklyn antique shop. Before officially obtaining the identity of a soldier and leaving here, maybe he can complete the collection plan of super soldier serum first. Time flies. On the 22nd, accompanied by a roar of explosions and gunshots, Erskine, the creator of super soldier serum, fell to the ground. In the panic, few people could stop the Hydra agent who was running for his life with the only remaining serum, except Steve, who had just completed the serum injection and transformed. The sound of gunfire and the roar of cars made the surrounding streets chaotic, but neither the ordinary people nor the Hydra agents, nor Steve, who was chasing the car with all his strength, realized that another pair of eyes were watching them silently in the dark. Controlling the biological force field, Lincoln seemed to be hanging high like a god. He looked at the chase below calmly, his eyes penetrated the clothes of the Hydra agent without any hindrance, and locked on the can of super soldier serum. Chapter 5, Good People and Good Deeds. On the streets of Brooklyn, Fred, a Hydra agent, was driving a taxi. He looked at the figure hanging on the rear of the car from the rearview mirror, and his eyes showed a look, as if he had seen a ghost. Can he catch up with the car at 80 miles per hour with just a pair of legs? Fred thought so in his heart, and he valued the super soldier serum in his pocket even more. He fully understood the importance of the serum after witnessing the entire enhancement plan. If he could get it, the mass-produced super soldiers would make Hydra the real master of the world. As a fanatic of Hydra, he was brainwashed and decided to bring the serum back at all costs. This was his mission. Fred's thoughts flashed in his mind, making his belief more firm, but the heavy pressure and collision from the roof made him realize that things had changed suddenly. Damn it. Thinking back to the distance from the harbor pier, Fred cursed in his heart, and without hesitation, he took out his pistol and pulled the trigger at the roof of the car. There is still hope. There is still hope. It's already very close. As long as he can reach the dock and get on the submersible, he can complete this mission. Long live Hydra. He cheered himself up. On the other side, at the harbor dock, various ships are moored here, and in the deep water, where light can hardly reach, a submersible with a technology level beyond this era is floating quietly. This uniquely shaped submersible is in a silent state. The design beyond the times makes it look like an unmanned submersible that should only appear in fantasy works. It should have quietly lurked under the water until the person who needed it arrived, but a figure that was not in everyone's plan made everything go to waste. At the dock, Lincoln, who took a different approach, did not wait for Fred and the others to chase all the way here, but stood on the dock early. The existence of supervision made the chaotic seawater unable to block Lincoln's sight. He could clearly see the submersible that was very different from the conventional submarine. He looked back and looked into the distance. His sight penetrated the crowd and the wall, and two figures were constantly approaching. After a moment of hesitation, he lowered his head and walked away. After a few breaths, he came back again. Looking at the can of red paint and the brush in his hand, Lincoln showed a kind smile. "I'm doing a good deed, right?" He would not directly involve himself in this matter. It was about the super soldier serum, and the strategic science corps, and even the US military might make any extreme reactions. Although Lincoln was not afraid, he was only one step away from getting a legitimate identity. There was no need to make trouble, so he planned to use some other methods. The biological force field was in effect, and the seawater could not get close to Lincoln. He carried the red paint bucket and worked hard underwater. After a while, he painted a huge Hydra icon on the submersible. With the black base and the red paint, the huge Hydra pattern was so conspicuous that anyone who was not blind could see it clearly at a glance. Masterpiece of painting. After taking a last look at his masterpiece, Lincoln surfaced and determined the path of Fred and the others. He hesitated for a moment and walked towards them. Bang! When a Superman is determined to have a chance encounter with a passerby, things are out of Fred's control. The collision of the strong forces immediately caused Fred, who was already in a hurry, to fall to the ground. He looked at Lincoln viciously, then raised his gun and pulled the trigger without hesitation. With a click, the sound of the empty bullet made his face stiffen, and he could only watch Lincoln's back disappear at the corner of the street in just a few breaths. Fred threw away the empty gun with anger in his heart. He didn't even bother to check the serum in his pocket and stumbled towards the offshore dock. Pressing the remote control button in his pocket, the core of the originally silent submersible started to work. Dr. Zala extracted the energy from the cosmic cube and used it in many places, including the product ahead of its time in front of him. The extraordinary energy core made the submersible almost noiseless and vibrationless, but looking at the red icon on the black fuselage, Fred couldn't help but open his eyes wide. Fuck. He didn't know which good person did the good deed. He only knew that he was so angry that he stopped and cursed, even when Steve was chasing him relentlessly. Fred was shaking with excitement, but at this time he had no time to study the specific reason for the icon. The transparent hatch opened, and he rushed into steps at a time. Then he stepped on the accelerator to the maximum and drove the submersible out of the port like a sword. Due to the existence of water, the speed of the submersible could not be faster than that of a car. Even the taxi, that could not break the speed of 80 km per hour, was much faster than the submersible under Fred's ass that was ahead of its time. Therefore, Fred's only chance to get rid of Steve was to sink. Before Steve caught up, he sank to a sufficient depth so that Steve would completely lose the trace of the submersible. He thought so and did so. On the shore, Steve, who was running, watched the black submersible dive rapidly in the surging waves, but even if it was just a fleeting glimpse, the bright red Hydra pattern had been deeply engraved in his mind. He rushed to the dock with a few quick steps, and then without hesitation, he was about to dive into the sea with a standard diving action, but a muffled sound stopped him. At the dock clock tower, Lincoln gently shook the test tube in his hand, and the azure liquid containing powerful power gently shook in it, like an unpredictable blue sea. Putting the test tube containing the serum into his pocket, Lincoln looked at the submersible that was rapidly diving under the surging white waves with a smile on his face, and looked at his new watch seriously. 321 boom. The roar of the explosion attracted everyone's attention. The so-called Cat 4 prints, replacing the super soldier serum with a timed explosive. This is what Lincoln did. The high explosive developed under the operation of the super brain exerted a destructive power beyond its size and appearance. Even with strong water pressure to suppress it, the energy released was still fierce. The powerful shock wave tore the entire submarine into pieces and scattered them all over the seabed. The sea surface, which was originally slightly turbulent, was affected by this impact and a splash of several meters high rose. There was no need to conduct too much investigation. With such a powerful explosion, Fred had no chance of survival, and there was no way to find the super soldier serum he took with him. On the shore, looking at the surging sea water, Steve, who did not have time to get into the water, felt a chill on his back. Chapter 6 My talents are hidden. There was no need for on-site investigation. The explosion was so powerful that the steel submarine was torn apart. Fred and the serum he was carrying were torn to pieces. Because of Lincoln's kindness, the strategic scientific core operation failed. Erkins, who created the super soldier serum, died. The submarine with a technological level beyond the times was blown up. The super soldier serum was gone, and there was no Hydra agent left. Except for the pattern that Lincoln painted with red paint that Steve remembered. The US military got nothing. In fact, it was not nothing. With that icon, they had reason to be sure that Hydra had more conspiracies and used it to attack. But according to their personality, 9 out of 10 would not do so, at least not in a big way. After all, it is their usual style to eat meat while their allies bleed. You are assigned to the 107th Infantry Regiment. Hold your gun, soldier. Lincoln? To be honest, although Lincoln already had the idea of working without effort in his heart, the 107th Infantry Regiment. Isn't that the unit where Steve's best friend Bucky is? Shouldn't this unit have been dispatched to Europe long ago? Why was he assigned to this team now? Could it be that too many people died and they needed to be supplemented? He had no idea about the military's deployment ideas, so he boarded the troop transport ship with a confused mind. After a bumpy ride, he successfully arrived at the European battlefield across the ocean. The World War II that Lincoln learned from history books and the World War II in this world with superheroes are different things. At least they are definitely different from the analysis of the battle situation. After all, this world has Hydra, and it would be weird if they were the same. The reality is, just as Lincoln guessed before, the 107th Infantry Regiment lost a lot of people in a sudden battle. In order to make up for it, new recruits from the rear were transported here, including Lincoln. So, Bucky looked at Lincoln, who was speechless, and smiled happily. I didn't expect to see you here. Yes, I didn't expect to see you here either. Lincoln nodded helplessly, expressing his feelings about the impermanence of the world. The conversation between Bucky and Lincoln aroused the curiosity of the other people in the barracks, and they could not help but gather around. Bucky, do you know him? Of course. Bucky smiled. He once helped me a lot and persuaded a friend of mine who could spend a whole day with the enemy. As he spoke, he blinked at Lincoln. That's right, isn't it? Lincoln knew Bucky's good intentions, so he could only nod in agreement. That's right. With Bucky's guarantee, there was no verbal abuse or exclusion in the 107th Infantry Regiment. In the situation where you may pick up a gun and fight on the battlefield at any time, excluding your comrades is really a stupid act with a muddled mind, even if Lincoln's identity and background are a bit unsociable. After a brief introduction, Bucky pulled Lincoln aside and asked curiously, have you seen Steve recently? I haven't received any letters from him for a while. Maybe it's because of the confidentiality agreement. Lincoln said casually, I saw him before I came here. You can't imagine how he has changed. Hearing this, Bucky immediately became interested. Can you tell me about it? He's taller now. Lincoln gestured. He should be about the same height as you, and he's also much stronger. Wait, he's taller, stronger? Bucky blinked. Although I'm not a big reader, Steve should have passed his puberty period. Did you recognize the wrong person? Lincoln shook his head with a smile on his face. You may still see him. You will be very surprised when you see him. Then you will know that what I said is true. Bucky looked at Lincoln steadily, trying to find the details of the joke from his face, but in the end he found nothing. With a hint of suspicion in his eyes, he tried to imagine what his friend would look like after he became taller and stronger, but suddenly, he smiled. He felt that he might have believed Lincoln's words because he was under too much pressure. Compared to Steve's height and strength, he felt that the possibility of magic in the world was higher. The conversation between Bucky and Lincoln came to an end temporarily. The old soldier wiped his gun and walked to Lincoln's side. Hey, newcomer, what are your special skills? Special skills? Lincoln looked at him and said nothing. The old soldier laughed and pointed at the people in the barracks. Each of us has a special skill. I'm a good shooter. Jack is good at long distance shooting. And although Buck shooting is not very accurate, he is good at fighting. What about you, newcomer? Lincoln pondered for a moment, and then a bright smile appeared on his face. To be honest, I'm good at explosions. As long as you give me the materials, I can show you what real art is. Explosion. This is a rare skill that Lincoln has mastered thoroughly. When he used his super brain to learn all the languages and characters in the world, he also understood and calculated the art of explosion. His superhuman intelligence allowed him to instantly learn this craft to a high level beyond this era. As long as there are enough materials, he can even rub nuclear bombs by hand. Lincoln's words made the veteran Deegan silent for a moment, and then he patted Lincoln on the shoulder. I hope you are right. Maybe we will use you next. With the new soldiers added, after a short rest, a new battle started again. As a corps that went deep into the interior of Europe, the 107th Infantry Regiment had to face many battles, but most of them were conventional battles, and there was no need or place for Lincoln to display his extraordinary blasting talent. However, his marksmanship was greatly improved. Sufficient bullet attacks, various human-shaped targets, coupled with strong physical and mental qualities, he became a well-known sharpshooter in the 107th Infantry Regiment. Whether it is a pistol, a rifle or any other gun, taking a life with one bullet is his basic operation, and the Grim Reaper has become his nickname. In comparison, his blasting talent is more concealed. Snipers are such precious talents, and precision and lethality are their synonyms. In contrast, blasting is the behavior of a reckless man. How can a talent be allowed to do reckless things? This is not good, and not making the best use of it. So, when the other infantrymen of the 107th Infantry Regiment charged on the battlefield with their guns, Lincoln only needed to hold the sniper rifle and take up the position at the back, and then pull the trigger twice from time to take away the two unlucky guys. Relying on his iron body and the protection of the biological force field, he was even too lazy to change his position. As long as the opponent did not drop a nuclear bomb, he would lose if he lost a hair. As for whether his abnormality would be seen by others, only a desperate person would stand next to an exposed sniper. That was like going to the toilet with a lantern, looking for death. The current situation was not what Lincoln had originally imagined, but he hit the mark unexpectedly, and his idea of hiding behind and slacking off was achieved. Chapter 7 Brainwashed Warrior. Mentally retarded warrior. The days of fishing are pleasant. When other enthusiastic American soldiers charged at the enemy with rifles, Lincoln only needed to stand behind with a gun and watch from a distance. If the situation was not very urgent, he could even fly to a farm dozens of miles away to get some fresh fruits to eat. Even so, under his care, the 107th Infantry Regiment did not suffer serious casualties, unless some of the unlucky ones were hit by shells and died without a complete body. But as time went by, the 107th Infantry Regiment, which continued to penetrate the interior of the front, finally ushered in the moment that could change the course of history. Schmidt, the soul of Hydra, sent a force to launch a surprise attack on Azano in order to obtain more prisoners as slaves and destroy the Allied front. More than 200 soldiers of the 107th Infantry Regiment fought bravely, but without Lincoln, the Superman, taking action. The battle situation finally deviated unstoppably from the predetermined historical trajectory. Klausburg, a factory fortress built by Hydra between two mountains. Relying on the protection of mountains and battle lines, this place has become a place that is difficult for the Allied forces to reach. Even the best Air Force pilots are afraid of the artillery fire here. This is Hydra's secret factory, which produces various energy weapons that can directly change the course of the war. The huge demand for energy weapons by the Hydra troops makes them always lack labor, but fortunately they won the Battle of Azano, so they added a considerable number of laborers. These people will be squeezed out of the last bit of strength in their flesh and blood and sent to the laboratory to become Zola's test subjects. It was the time for prisoners of war to be transported, and the lower level of Klausburg was noisy. Footsteps, curses, whippings, and cries of pain were intertwined in it, and some indifferent conversations sounded from time to time, as if discussing how to save themselves. On the upper floor, the laboratory, a numb-eyed figure was tied tightly to the medical bed with a cowhide bandage. His eyes were dull like a severely mentally ill patient, and he just kept mumbling and repeating a rank and number. The miserable state of the experimented subjects could not move the Hydra soldiers at all. He was covered by a full coverage combat uniform and his voice was as cold as a machine. "Doctor, a new batch of prisoners has been delivered. Excluding those who are unable to move and work, there are 23 people left. 23 people." Dr. Zora looked at the soldier lying numbly on the medical bed and pondered for a moment. "Bring one person out. I can use him." "Yes. Klausberg, the lower level prison cell." "Lynn, how did you get caught?" Dugan looked at Lincoln in surprise. "Aren't you a sniper? Could it be that those people also outflanked and went around?" "Almost." Lincoln pondered for a moment. "I was originally at the back, but when the opponent charged, I was no longer at the back." "Okay." Thinking of the final appearance of the battle, Dugan nodded, and then hammered a steel cage heavily. "These damn asterisk asterisk asterisk." Squeak. It seemed that Dugan's curse attracted the attention of those soldiers, and the soldiers sent by Zora opened the cage where the two were. His eyes were fixed on Dugan, but it seemed that he saw his exposed muscles. The Hydra soldier was silent for a moment, and finally turned his eyes to Lincoln, who was dressed in a way that didn't show his flesh. "You, follow me." "Lincoln?" A few minutes later, in the laboratory, looking at Lincoln, who was in good spirits, Zora couldn't help but frown. His experiments were related to destroying the spirit and brainwashing. In theory, the more haggard the talent, the more he met his requirements. And Lincoln? How could he, a superman, be haggard? Zora was not satisfied with these stupid brainwashed warriors under his command, but he didn't ask for a replacement in the end. Instead, he pointed to the medical bed and turned around to debug the equipment. "Tie him up." Hiss, hiss. The abnormal energy emission sounded behind him, and Zora's finger on the button suddenly stopped. His nose couldn't help but twitch twice, and a smell of coke and barbecue entered his nose. Zora seemed to realize something, and turned around slowly, and saw Lincoln, whose red light in his eyes was gradually fading. He glanced at the ground behind Lincoln. Under the heat of thousands of degrees, a big hole had been burned in the chests of the two Hydra soldiers. The combat uniforms melted and burned under the terrifying high temperature, emitting orange-red flames and scorching temperatures. The blurred flesh and blood had been completely cooked and charred, without any blood. In just a moment, the two soldiers equipped with energy weapons were gone. "Can you tell me what experiment you want to do?" With a little red light hidden in his dark pupils, Lincoln smiled, and the breath emanating from his body was as terrifying as a devil from hell. The two corpses on the ground died with their eyes open. The red light in Lincoln's eyes frightened Zora. He couldn't help but take 2 steps back and stammered, "Brainwashing, brainwashing experiment. Brainwashing?" Lincoln looked back at the corpses on the ground. "Are these the results of your brainwashing?" "Yes, yes." Zora nodded, then carefully pushed his eyes up. "Germany cannot provide us with excellent and sufficient troops, so Schmidt asked me to use this method to build an army that can be controlled by him." "Is that so?" Lincoln pondered for a moment. "Can your brainwashing be lifted?" "Generally speaking, no." Zora seemed to have realized that Lincoln had no intention of killing him for the time being, so he relaxed. "Because the technology is not perfect, the success of brainwashing is fundamentally based on the destruction of the original mental will, so then can you brainwash them a second time?" "Second brainwashing?" Zora showed a trace of confusion on his face. "I don't know. No one has ever done it." "Then find someone to try it." Lincoln looked around and locked his eyes on the door of the laboratory. "I remember there should be 2 gatekeepers there. Let them in." Zora was a little confused, and he tried to explain something, but, "I said, let them in." Lincoln's eyes were slightly fixed, and the red light in his eyes made Zora swallow all the rest of his words. He was a little helpless, and shouted to the outside of the door, "People outside, come in." Zora was really helpless. Schmidt still had a certain degree of vigilance against him. Those outside who said they were protecting him were actually monitoring him. From the level of brainwashing, those people would not clearly obey his orders, so Enemy spotted. Shoot. Hearing the voice from under the black mask, Zora, who was squatting behind the desk without hesitation, had a headache. These brainwashed warriors were completely inflexible like humans, and were as rigid as artificial mental retardation. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8. What did you catch? Exclamation mark. BIU. BIU. The familiar sound of the energy weapon was heard, and the next moment, the roar of the explosion swept across the entire laboratory. The energy of the cosmic cube is almost endless, but that doesn't mean it is docile enough. When the energy in the battery is guided and emitted, the destructive power of the energy with special properties is far greater than all forms of energy currently mastered by humans. The human body is vulnerable to this energy, and even steel will only be melted and pierced. However, in the dark blue beam and dazzling explosion, Lincoln's figure was as majestic as Mount Tay, and the energy that was enough to tear steel into pieces bombarded Lincoln without even leaving a trace on his clothes. The sweeping shockwave and flames shattered the entire room, and even though Zora buried his body completely behind the desk, he was still covered in dust. He looked over with lingering fear, and at first glance, Lincoln appeared in his eyes without any injury. Is that all? Lincoln waved his hand to blow away the dust floating in the air. He looked at the Hydra soldiers in front of him calmly. The red light in his eyes gradually grew stronger. You should just die. Hiss. BIU. A dark blue energy beam burst out from the muzzle of the gun in an instant. At the same time, a fiery red ray burst out from Lincoln's eyes. The two energy beams collided in mid-air. In just a moment, the blue beam was mercilessly torn apart. The strong and violent energy was released again, and in the fire and shockwave, the red laser turned the two Hydra soldiers into charcoal without any resistance. With two bangs, the wreckage with a burnt smell fell down. Looking at the room filled with flames and poisonous fog, Lincoln frowned slightly. His lips moved slightly, and he exhaled a breath. The biting cold breath immediately spread in the room. The cold wind that was enough to freeze everything spread across the room, extinguishing the flames wherever it passed, and even the dust floating in the air fell to the ground under the ice crystals condensed from the water vapor. In just a few breaths, the room that was originally scorched like a battlefield turned into a polar ruins covered with ice and snow. The biting cold could not pose any threat to Lincoln, but Zora, who was only wearing a simple suit, shivered with cold, and even a thin layer of frost hung on his eyebrows. His hands and feet were cold, not only because of the low temperature in the room, but also because of the power displayed by Lincoln. With his body resisting the energy beam, his heat vision tearing the energy beam apart, and a breath turning the room from a fire scene into a polar region. In Zora's opinion, the strength displayed by Lincoln was equivalent to the god that Schmidt was madly chasing. He now had only one question in his mind: how did such a person get caught in Klausburg? Those stupid, mentally retarded brainwashed warriors, what did you catch back? Exclamation mark. Hiding behind the desk whose front was completely destroyed, Zora looked at Lincoln's back tremblingly, and he couldn't imagine how such a terrifying energy could be hidden in this humanoid body. He was secretly speculating when Lincoln's voice suddenly rang out. Aren't you ready to come out yet? When will you see? You are in big trouble. Zora raised his hands and stood up. He pointed to a damaged room. Schmidt has installed cameras everywhere here. Nothing here can be hidden from his eyes. If you don't leave here quickly, in a while, hundreds, thousands or even more soldiers will surround you. You have no chance of winning. Really? Lincoln smiled, without any fear in his eyes. Then let him come over, but before that, you have to undergo a brainwashing process first. I can't do it. Zora shook his head and rejected Lincoln. Brainwashing requires a suitable environment and enough time. Here. As he said, he looked at the room full of frost crystals, and the meaning in his tone was self-evident. Lincoln didn't know what the brainwashing Zora mentioned was, but looking at Zora, who was frozen like a dog, and the ice crystals in the room that exuded cold temperature, he nodded in approval. This cold environment does not seem to be suitable for brainwashing. But it doesn't matter, he has a second alternative place. Lincoln's pupil focus changed, and his ability of perspective was activated. Klausberg, which was made of thick reinforced concrete and built in the mountains, quickly became illusory and transparent in his eyes. The densely packed figures became clearly visible in his eyes, and he could even clearly see the dazzling energy core in a separate room. There is no doubt that Lincoln has sufficient reason to believe that the dazzling energy core is the cosmic cube that hides the space gem, and the figure next to the cosmic gem is the real ruler of Hydra. Schmidt. Brainwashing requires a suitable environment and enough time. In this regard, what place can be more suitable than Schmidt's command room? Without any hesitation, Lincoln grabbed Zora's collar and dragged him out of the room that had become a ruin. In the upper command room, the shockwave of the energy explosion was still strong enough even after layers of buffering. Feeling the vibration coming from his feet, Schmidt immediately stopped what he was doing. He turned on the monitoring equipment in his office. That was enough to monitor the entire situation of Klausberg, and then he saw the room reduced to ruins and Zora dragged away by Lincoln. Damn it. Schmidt didn't know what happened after a quick look, but he was sure that an outsider had appeared in his factory. And this damn outsider also hijacked Zora, who mastered energy technology, and what was more serious was that the outsider was still walking towards his office. Schmidt couldn't tolerate such a challenge to his dignity and status. Without much hesitation, he pressed the button on the console, and the voice came out from the speaker and appeared in the barracks. Everyone, take your weapons and guard all the passages from B3 to the command room. I want you to catch that damn guy and bring him to me. Schmidt, who had not seen Lincoln's ability, made a wrong decision. Looking at the Hydra soldiers who had completely filled the passage in front of him, Lincoln smiled. Killing? It's very simple. Lincoln has a lot of ways. Thermal vision, super speed, and super strength can all do it, and it's very easy, but he doesn't intend to use such a bloody method. He made a slight gesture to the real-time monitoring above his head, and then took a deep breath, and blew it slowly. Click click, it was like the arrival of the Ice Age. Everything was frozen. Crossing the ice sculptures that had no signs of life, Lincoln slowly forced his way forward. On the other side, looking at the densely packed ice sculptures in the monitoring, Schmidt seemed to be frozen as well. What the hell did I catch? This was the only thought in his mind. Chapter 9 Red Skull. I'll find a father for myself and for Zora. Frost and cold air spread all the way in the passage, as if the ancient ice age reappeared, and everything froze wherever it passed. If Lincoln wanted, the cold breath he blew could completely affect the transmission of electricity and even signals, but considering that Zora would also die suddenly at this temperature, he finally controlled the temperature slightly. The rows of Hydra soldiers wearing black protective clothing had all their body functions frozen, but beside them, Zora could walk like a normal person. Lincoln has mastered the control of temperature. Seeing Lincoln's magical method again, Zora's awe in his heart was even greater, and he had completely recognized Lincoln's identity as a strong man. Since he could switch from the asterisk to Hydra because of the threat of Schmidt's gun, then naturally, he could also betray Schmidt here because of the power Lincoln showed now. Before Lincoln could say anything more or take any additional actions, Zora spoke first. We should move faster. If Schmidt finds us, he will definitely activate the self-destruct system, and the entire Klausberg will be completely destroyed. Don't worry. Lincoln raised his head and looked at the room, where Schmidt was from a distance, with a slight smile on his face. He can't do it, and he won't do it. In an icy corridor, countless frost and cold air meandered along the pipes hidden in the dark, freezing everything it touched. Under the terrifying low temperature, even metal became thin and brittle, cracking and breaking with fine sounds, and the originally smooth passage began to be interrupted. What? Zora didn't know what happened in the dark, but looking at the ice sculptures around him, he finally chose to keep silent. He was a weak person, and the weak could not recognize what the strong people who were beyond their imagination could do. In the upper control room, watching Lincoln and the other man on the screen approaching the room where he was, Schmidt's eyes were cold. A cold smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he pressed the self-destruct button without hesitation. After a light click, Schmidt's eyes were dull. He looked down at the unresponsive control console, his eyes full of disbelief and suspicion. Click click, as if he had found a button that would earn him 100 million yuan for each press. Schmidt's palm almost frantically slapped on the red self-destruct button, but no matter how many times he pressed it, the self-destruct system seemed to be out of order and did not respond. No, Schmidt growled, his face gradually revealing a hideous madness, but suddenly, a cold breath suddenly rushed out from the bright red button. A sudden sense of crisis emerged in the Red Skull's heart, and he subconsciously loosened his palm from the button. But just this moment of contact, the leather gloves had already condensed with a layer of frost. Looking down at the button again, it was completely frozen, and could no longer be pressed. Damn it. How is it possible? Schmidt took off his gloves, and looked at the frost spreading on the console. His face suddenly changed. As a scientist with higher education, although he pursued the power of God, when the means close to God were presented before his eyes, he was full of disbelief. He pursued God not to find a master for himself, but to obtain the power of God, to become the master of the world. But now, Lincoln's appearance made things develop in the direction he least wanted to see, and it was irreversible. Snap snap, the fine frost was still spreading on the console. Seeing that the omnipresent cold air was spreading to places outside the console, Schmidt finally realized the current situation. I will remember you. He clenched his teeth and looked at Lincoln walking slowly on the screen, his eyes full of resentment, and then turned around without hesitation and walked towards the energy output device containing the cosmic cube. He wanted to give up Klausberg, which was no longer suitable for a place to stay. Before leaving, he wanted to take the cosmic cube with him. He reached out and turned the metal handle, but before he could take the cosmic cube, which was emitting a blue glow, out of the container, a voice sounded behind him. If I were you, for the sake of my life, I would choose to loosen my handshake. The plain voice brought the greatest shock to Schmidt. His pupils expanded sharply, and the muscles on his face kept trembling. Even the human skin mask could not cover it. Suddenly, he turned around and confronted Lincoln. Stop. If you dare to take another step forward, I will smash it. Then, you will die too. What a stupid idea. Lincoln didn't care about Schmidt's threat. He walked to the table and picked up the strong liquor on the table. His fingers circled the bottle neck, and his sharp nails cut the glass neatly like a diamond knife. He poured the light yellow liquor into the glass, and Lincoln held it on the table and tapped it lightly. A chill froze the liquor from bottom to top. But the next moment, Lincoln's eyes flashed red again, and a wisp of flame rose from the mouth of the glass in Schmidt's twitching expression. Leisurely sipping the ice wine with dancing flames, Lincoln leaned against the table and shook the wine glass contentedly. Swing it. Better use more force. I'm afraid you may not be able to break this cube. You. Looking at Lincoln, Schmidt was shocked and angry. He originally wanted to use the cosmic cube in his hand as a threat, but Lincoln's current attitude shattered his idea. If he fell, the cosmic cube would either break or not, but no matter whether the cosmic cube would break or not, he would die. Schmidt didn't want to die, but he didn't have a strong enough body to use the Infinity Stones, so even if he was holding the cosmic cube wrapped in the Space Stone in his hand, he was no different from a baby with bare hands when facing Lincoln. Lincoln knew this, and the Red Skull also knew this, but he was unwilling to admit it. When he found that his threat was not a threat to Lincoln at all, in order to find a way out, he could only point his spearhead at Zora, who had been hiding behind him. It's you. You betrayed me, Zora. Red Skull's behavior of picking on the weak caught Zora off guard. He couldn't help but widen his eyes, looking at the angry Red Skull who wanted to eat his flesh alive, and then looking at Lincoln, who was watching the show with a glass of wine on the side. Zora was silent. Whether it was Lincoln who had superhuman power, or Red Skull who was in charge of the entire Hydra, neither of them was someone that a scientist like him could afford to provoke. If Red Skull brought back a father for himself, then now Zora has two fathers above his head. Chapter 10, Humans of Limits. After realizing this, Zora was extremely depressed, but he didn't dare to have any opinions because of the power above him. He just lowered his head silently and didn't dare to get involved in the fight between the two big guys he couldn't afford to offend. Zora's obedient submission left Schmidt with no chance to vent his anger. He looked at Lincoln again and faced the smile with a hint of sarcasm, and Schmidt felt powerless from the inside out. I'll give you 3 seconds. Lincoln put the wine glass on the table, revealing the watch that was turning. If you haven't made a choice by then, let me help you make a choice. 1. Schmidt looked at Lincoln angrily, his eyes full of unyielding. 2. Schmidt was still angry enough, but the unyielding in his eyes had been replaced by deep thought. 3. Snap. As if it had become an instinct, when the third character fell from Lincoln's mouth, Schmidt loosened his grip and let the cosmic cube emitting azure blue light return to where it should be. He raised his hands high, took a step back, to show that he was harmless, and looked at Lincoln. Who are you? Who am I? Lincoln pulled the logo on his clothes forward. Don't you see it? I'm an American soldier now, a soldier who was unfortunately captured by your troops. Stop talking nonsense. Schmidt looked at Lincoln coldly. If those American soldiers were like, no, even if there was only one like you, Hitler and asterisk would have failed long ago. Besides, your appearance is very different from those Americans. You can count me as a soldier for the time being. At least I still have a military salary so far. Lincoln shrugged indifferently, turned his head, and looked at Zora behind him. Okay, I found the place you want. Next, it's your turn to perform. Did you really betray me? Facing Schmidt's murderous eyes, Zora's expression was very embarrassed. He stepped forward, but took a half step back under the intimidation of Schmidt's eyes, and then began to explain. He wanted me to conduct a brainwashing experiment, but your people blew up my lab. So you brought him to my office? Schmidt looked at Zora in disbelief, as if it was the first day he met this short, evil-minded subordinate. Zora pondered for a moment. If I say that this is just an accident and a coincidence, will you believe it? Schmidt did not speak, but just looked at Zora coldly, and the meaning was clear. Realizing this, Zora sighed helplessly and stopped explaining. Instead, he spoke in a semi-commanding tone. I need a team of soldiers and corresponding equipment to complete my experiment. So, Schmidt, let your people come in. How dare you order me? Schmidt growled, but after catching a glimpse of Lincoln fiddling with the console, he took a deep breath again. I will definitely cooperate with you. Dog bites dog, and the result is a mouthful of fur. Neither Zora nor Schmidt is a good thing. Lincoln is happy to see them confronting each other. On the contrary, if they get along well, Lincoln may have to take some extra measures. Of course, it would not be something unskilled like killing, but to create hatred and opposition in other ways, such as letting them choose whether to cut off their own important parts or the other parties. But it is not necessary now. As for why he did not kill Zora or Red Skull, of course it was because it was unnecessary. Zora could be kept for brainwashing experiments, to root new ideas in those people outside, and maybe he could come up with some weird things. As for Red Skull, this guy would be teleported to other planets by the space stone anyway, and disappear for decades. Of course, these are not the most critical reasons. The most important thing is that these two people did not do stupid things to disgust Lincoln. At least they did not humiliate Lincoln with words, nor did they try to kill Lincoln with any actions. Even before, Red Skull just wanted to capture him alive, so he got a chance to live. And they were too weak, so weak that Lincoln was not qualified to look at them straight in the eye, so it didn't matter whether they were killed or not. Neither Schmidt nor Zora knew where Lincoln's principles were, but considering that this American soldier allowed Hydra to let him brainwash, and even wanted to brainwash himself, they thought Lincoln might have no bottom line. The most difficult thing to figure out and control in this world is people with no bottom line. The disparity between the enemy and us made Schmidt give up the futile idea of revenge, and obediently accepted the fact that he had fallen from the supreme ruler of Hydra, and deeply realized the fact that a new person like a Big Daddy had emerged above his head. On the other side, Zora quickly used the simple equipment characteristic of this era to reconduct the brainwashing experiment. This time, it was not the prisoners in the lower cage who were sent to the medical table, but the Hydra soldiers who had undergone a round of brainwashing. The origins of these soldiers are difficult to investigate, but they have lost their self-esteem and are not outstanding in all aspects. They are the best consumables. Adhering to the consistent black technology characteristics of the Marvel world, Zora adopted a brainwashing method that Lincoln could not understand at all. Colors, images, sounds, a series of fragmented information cut and reshaped the world of Hydra soldiers again, and implanted a new will according to Lincoln's wishes. Everything was going very smoothly, but just when Zora breathed a sigh of relief, a sudden change occurred. As if he had seen something horrible in the spiritual world, the Hydra soldier's heartbeat began to accelerate sharply, and his pupils began to dilate uncontrollably. The medicine that Zora hastily injected could not save the life of the test subject at all. After just a few minutes, the test subject's body stopped twitching. Has this happened before? Lincoln, who had the ability of perspective, stood aside and watched the whole process. He not only saw the fear in the test subject's eyes, but also saw the deep changes in his body. Zora could not see these deep information, but he had sufficient brainwashing experience after many experiments, but now he also showed a trace of confusion in his eyes. It shouldn't be like this, Zora explained. Even if he failed, his end should be just mental disorder and become a crazy or non-crazy psychopath. Not like now. I feel like he was scared to death. Really? Lincoln narrowed his eyes slightly. Just before, in a moment that humans could not perceive, he saw a ray of energy flashing in the test subject's brain. He thought it was a coincidence, but now it seems that it is not. If more experiments are conducted, perhaps this energy can be captured, but Lincoln no longer intends to try. He knows that there are many mysterious things in the Marvel world, so he decided to take it slow. When he becomes invincible, he will find the owner of this energy and have a good chat. As for now, that's it. Lincoln looked at Zora. The human spirit has its limits. Secondary brainwashing cannot be carried out, and the experiment is terminated. Thanks to Subo Zulu for the 100 points reward. Chapter 11. Ancient One's Visit. In an indescribable unknown dimension, chaos and gorgeous colors are the only tone here. A night composed of distorted space and surging energy suddenly appeared, looking far away beyond the endless void, where a barrier composed of 3 golden nodes loomed. Earth. The intangible dimensional demon looked at the world, where the blue planet was, his eyes full of desire. His thoughts touched, and an inexplicable force surged in time and space, and approached the barrier. Buzz. The buzzing sound echoed, and golden ripples spread on the surface of the barrier. The next moment, a figure in a yellow robe suddenly appeared. She stretched out her hand, and moved it lightly, and the vibrating barrier was calmed. At this time, Ancient One looked up at the indescribable void. You have crossed the line. The dimensional demon remained silent, only staring at her with eyes as big as stars, and then slowly disappeared after a long time. I will wait, waiting for the day you leave, then they will still be mine. The power of the demon is extremely terrifying. Even Ancient One can only compete with it with the magic circle, left by Vishanti and the magic contributed by Dormammu. But she knew that, as long as she was alive, the threat of these demons would not be a concern. The figure returned to Kamatage School of Mages, and Ancient One walked into the mirror space independent of reality. The space fluctuated and changed under her will, and the image of each person was refracted in front of her like a projection in a kaleidoscope. Counting the figures among them, Ancient One finally locked his eyes on the sound of a figure in Klausberg. She exhaled slightly, pushed out with one palm, and the mirror and reality were communicated. Klausberg. The secondary brainwashing plan that Zora was in charge of was aborted before it even started. Looking at the Hydra soldier who was no longer breathing on the medical bed, being dragged out of the door, Zora looked at Lincoln in a bit of a loss. What should I do next? Conduct relevant experiments on the cosmic cube. Lincoln walked to the instrument that stored and continuously exported the energy of the cosmic cube and patted the steel shell. I want you to design a new type of structure that can output the energy in it in a softer way. At least it should be able to react and release energy instantly without contacting matter. Lincoln's request not only made Zora a little troubled, but also Schmidt's face changed a little. No, I also wanted to make energy weapons. I'll give you a chance to reorganize your language. Lincoln looked at him calmly, with a red light in his eyes. What did you just say? No, nothing. Schmidt was unsurprisingly scared again. Just as Lincoln reached out to take the cosmic cube emitting blue light out of the container, the sound of a broken mirror suddenly rang in his ears. Then, a unique feeling swept across his body, causing Lincoln to raise his brows. Master Ancient One. Released the handle in his hand. Lincoln turned back to look at the place where the heartbeat was, even though there was nothing there. Since you are already here, why not show your true self? You know a lot. As if in a trance, the figure of Ancient One suddenly flashed in the empty space Lincoln was staring at, her face indifferent. "Can you tell me about it?" "I don't think it's necessary." Lincoln pointed to the eye of Agamotto hanging on Ancient One's neck. "I don't know more than what you see with that thing, and it's just one of the futures. But you, the guardian of the dimension, why don't you deal with those dimensional demons and pay attention to a small shrimp like me?" "You are not a small shrimp." Ancient One smiled indifferently. "You changed all the future that I can observe and made everything out of my control. If you are also a small shrimp, strange should be even less worth mentioning. Can't you control me?" Lincoln looked at the two people outside the mirror space who were surprised by his disappearance. Mirror space, time loop, thought exile, physical confinement. None of them should be difficult for you, but in the end, things will lead to the worst result. Ancient One interrupted him. "I have used these methods in the infinite future, but no matter what means you use, after a certain point in time, you will disappear and return in a more powerful posture in the future. That will no longer be just a disaster for the Earth, but a disaster for the entire real dimension. But fortunately it has not happened in the future, so I'm going to have a good talk with you." Lincoln touched his chin. "Your words reminded me of what Strange said when he brought the time stone to Dormammu. So this time the time stone is not sealed in the Agamotto." Ancient One lifted the chain around his neck and shook it. "I kept it somewhere else, in an equally safe place. Aren't you afraid that Cassilis will do something dirty?" His eyes are focused on the book of Cagliostro, and the things about Dormammu recorded in it should attract his attention more. "That's not necessarily true." Lincoln reached out and scooped it up and took the wine bottle in the real world into the mirror space. "If it were me, the time stone is right in front of me, and I can do both resurrection and immortality. Why bother learning any forbidden techniques?" "So this is the difference between you and ordinary wizards." Ancient One smiled and said, "Cassilis betrayed me, but he did not betray himself or magic. TSK, you always say things like those charlatans." Lincoln shrugged. "Tell me, what are you going to talk to me about?" "The first thing, don't conduct dangerous experiments like secondary brainwashing anymore." "Secondary brainwashing? Dangerous?" Lincoln looked at Ancient One with a strange expression. If I remember correctly, Buggy had been brainwashed countless times in his original future, right? But the different hosting entities make the degree of attention they receive from the dimensional demon gods also different. Ancient One casually drew a series of bright lines in the air. "Just like the same thing. If it's done by a beggar and the president, there will be different attention and influence. Your existence will make those guys restless. You should not want to confront those guys too early." "That's true." Lincoln thought of the power that flashed in the soldier's mind, hesitated for a moment and nodded. "Okay, when I'm sure, I will summon them to play with them. Or you can choose to take over Agamotto and become the Sorcerer Supreme, and then work for you and Kamatage for free." Lincoln complained. "You'd better go to Strange for this kind of good thing. I have no interest at all. But if you are willing to show your magic in front of me, I might be interested in learning." Chapter 12 Build a Hotel. Ancient One did not speak, but just smiled at Lincoln. Lincoln and Ancient One looked at each other and suddenly said, "Or I can wait until you are stabbed to death by your filial apprentice Caecilius, and then ask Mordo or Strange, unless you are ready to change the future yourself." The smile on Ancient One's face rose. She knew that Lincoln was definitely capable of doing such a thing. She also knew that, if she did not intervene and cause the future to change, Lincoln's plan would most likely succeed. The failure part mainly depended on whether Mordo or Strange would die early. "Okay." Ancient One exhaled. "I can open the library of Kamatage to you, but there is one thing, you can't take the books out of Kamatage. Would you consider getting me a library card? Unless you can guarantee that you will not take those books away from this reality dimension we are in now." Ancient One looked at Lincoln. "Otherwise there will be no library card." "Forget it." Lincoln waved his hand. "The books stored in the library of Kamatage are not just books. Ordinary spell books are fine, but those forbidden books, each one is not just a simple piece of paper, but also a carrier. It is an established fact that the Infinity Stones cannot be used outside this universe, but these books are different. No one has tried it yet. However, it is obvious that he has tried it in the future and caused some scenes that Ancient One did not want to see. The Supreme Sorcerer directly blocked this road. Since the books cannot be taken away from this world, there is no need to discuss whether to take them out of Kamataj. With his brain, if necessary, he only needs a very short time to memorize the entire library. Opening it once is equivalent to opening it permanently. Ancient One did not make a routine about whether Lincoln would grab the books after his death, but continued, "Don't take the initiative to communicate and attract the demons. As for the rest, you can regard it as my advice to you. What if I don't accept your advice?" Lincoln was a little curious. "Suggestions are just suggestions," Ancient One said calmly. "I just proposed it. Whether you accept it or not is not up to me. Tell me, what suggestions?" Ancient One nodded and said, "My suggestion is, crash." Lincoln was listening attentively, and the sound of the mirror breaking suddenly rang in his ears, and then he returned to the real dimension from the mirror space. In 1,000th of a millisecond, Lincoln expanded his 5 senses to the maximum, and vaguely, he felt the figure of the Ancient One quickly disappearing. At this time, he finally understood what happened. The Ancient One deliberately left half of her words unfinished and ran away. He didn't know which future the Ancient One saw things from, but she did succeed. Lincoln was so uncomfortable that his eyes looking at Schmidt and Zora became a little wrong. I already have an idea for a preliminary design." Zora raised her hand and shouted, "By constraining the limiter, it may be possible to slightly change the nature of energy so that it will not react violently with matter." "Well done." Lincoln nodded and looked at Schmidt. "So what did you do?" I Schmidt was speechless and choked, and he kept complaining in his heart, "How do I know what you want me to do? I'm not a worm in your stomach. If you want me to die, just say it." Schmidt, who couldn't say 2 words for a long time, was depressed. Lincoln looked at him carefully and knew that the ambitious man in front of him might not be able to do anything practical. Schmidt would be a good spy, assassination, and leading troops in battle, but other than these things, Schmidt had no other outstanding skills. Oh, he seemed to be a scientist, but the problem was that his scientific level was much worse than Zala's. Without Lincoln's idea of leading Hydra to unify the world, Schmidt's role was indeed limited. Lincoln looked at Schmidt and pondered for a moment, then gave an order that seemed absurd to Schmidt. "You separate a secret force and go to Europe and the United States to acquire assets for me so that I can enjoy them in the future." Acquisition? Schmidt's eyes were full of confusion, and he couldn't help but step forward. "We can unify the world, and then everything will be ours." "I don't like the ideological theme of Hydra and the Communist Party." Lincoln stared at Schmidt. "Whether it is German supremacy or your other ideological themes, I don't like them. Do you understand what I mean?" Looking at Lincoln's face, Schmidt suddenly understood everything, and a layer of cold sweat broke out on his back. Regardless of the policies of the Communist Party or Hydra, people like Lincoln are the first to be eliminated. Schmidt can already imagine that, if he insists on continuing, he will definitely die before his goal is achieved. Knowing this, he naturally will not continue to be stupid, and immediately nodded in response. "I understand. I will send people to establish a new system independent of Hydra in major regions around the world, and the name will be, just call it. Let's call it Continental Hotel." Lincoln randomly called out a name that was more in line with his expectations from his memory. Main business, hotel models and all other industries that can be enjoyed, and secondary business, assassination. Schmidt's face was stern, and he heard what Lincoln meant. Zala took away his cosmic cube, and the Continental Hotel was going to take away a considerable number of his secret powers. According to this, it would become even more difficult for him to rule the world. But fortunately, he still had a chance. The things in Klausberg were enough to bomb Europe and the United States, and give up Africa and Asia, and he could still achieve part of his previous plan. Schmidt's eyes flashed with conspiracy. Lincoln saw it, but he knew that Schmidt's chance of failure would be very high. The reason was simple. Just when he used his 5 senses to search for the whereabouts of the Ancient One, he saw a figure carrying a shield rushing here. Once Klausberg was destroyed, Schmidt's failure was a foregone conclusion. Lincoln did not intend to change this outcome, because the world under the rule of Hydra would be boring, and the world ruled by the only powerful force would always be boring. Schmidt, who received the order, did not look at Zora, who was tinkering with the cosmic cube. He walked out of the room quickly and organized people to build the Continental Hotel. Lincoln did not disturb Zora either. He just reached out and picked up a battery that stored the energy of the space gem and then turned it on. The structure of the battery designed by Zora was so special that it would not affect the existence of the internal energy after opening it, but as Lincoln reached out and touched it, things changed. The biological standpoint restricted and restrained the divergence of space energy from the inside out, and the seemingly gentle energy penetrated into Lincoln's body as soon as it touched his skin. Chapter 13 Space Gem. Each of the Infinity Stones can be controlled and driven by living beings, so the energy in them is compatible with life. It is just because of the powerful energy of the gems and the weakness of the living beings that come into contact with them, so no one on Earth can directly withstand the energy of the gems, even just one of them. Dr. Zola did not understand the deep-seated reasons, but he successfully used this characteristic of the gem energy. Even if only a trace of space energy is extracted, it exceeds the upper limit of ordinary living matter, so anyone who comes into contact with this energy will turn into ashes the moment it comes into contact with it. But Lincoln is different. He is an exception. It has been a few months since he came to this world. Even if Lincoln did not chase the sun like a moth to a flame, his ability has long been strengthened to an incredible degree. For ordinary people, space energy that can be lethal can be tolerated in front of Lincoln, not to mention that the energy contained in the energy battery is not much. The Azure space energy is like water that meets a sponge. It penetrates into Lincoln's body from his skin in an instant and flows freely in his body along the lines of muscles, blood vessels and even bones. Looking at the fingertips that showed alienated colors under the effect of space energy, Lincoln's eyes flashed with interest. He could feel the incredible strengthening of his cells brought by the space energy, and at the same time he could feel the slightest oppression. This sense of oppression acted on both the body and the soul, but Lincoln was so strong that the pressure that could instantly crush a person seemed insignificant. Limited by the level of basic materials at that time, the battery made by Zora did not actually contain much energy. The surging feeling only appeared for a short moment and then disappeared again. However, this can make Lincoln sure of one thing, that his physical strength is enough to withstand the impact of the energy of the space gem. Schmidt had already left. Lincoln looked at Zora, who was still busy around the instrument, frowned slightly, stretched out his hand, and grabbed the handle to lift the cosmic cube that contained the space gem out of the instrument. Don't. There was no time to stop him. In Zora's horrified eyes, Lincoln stretched out his right palm and grabbed the cosmic cube in his hand. The next moment, accompanied by a light sound, a dazzling light rose on the surface of the Rubik's Cube. This dazzling light was as dazzling as the blooming sun. Even if Zora used both hands, it was difficult to block the blazing light from radiating in the room. He kept retreating until he was pressed against the hard and cold wall. The light in front of him gradually faded. Looking at Lincoln holding the cosmic cube, Zora was stunned. This is impossible. Zora's pupils hidden under the frame widened to the maximum. He staggered forward with disbelief in his eyes. No one can withstand that violent energy. How is this possible? Everything is possible. Lincoln held the cosmic cube in one hand, feeling the energy in it flowing into his body continuously. This feeling of fullness made him feel that he was omnipotent. He knew it was an illusion, but it was not entirely an illusion. At least, now that he had mastered the cosmic cube, he could indeed play with space at will. In the field of space, he was omnipotent. Even the magic of the Ancient One could hardly shake his control of space. Taking the cosmic cube to fight with Ancient One? Lincoln didn't have this idea. He looked at the window filled with the scenery of snow-capped mountains, and his left hand, which was not holding the cosmic cube, tapped lightly in the air. Buzz. Blue ripples echoed throughout the room, and the space was tampered with and distorted under Lincoln's will. The steel and concrete that was originally filled with a cold taste quickly faded and was replaced by a deep starry sky shining with starlight. Watching himself coming from the office to the starry sky in an instant, Zora had completely lost his ability to speak and move, and the meteorites and stars that passed by him from time to time hit his three views again and again. It's so beautiful. In the starry sky, Lincoln praised sincerely and then looked at the yellow stars in the distant direction. He stretched out his hand and pulled gently, and the originally weak light became extremely fierce, turning into a beam of light that was enough to burn the world and bombarded Lincoln. But this light, that was enough to destroy all creations in the human world, did not bring Lincoln any pressure. On the contrary, it could only make him stronger. In the starry sky, seeing that the extremely terrifying beam of light could not kill Lincoln, Zora was stunned. When he saw that the light was constantly distorted and reconstructed, as if a layer of armor was covering Lincoln, he had already uttered an unconscious abba. Zora's spirit had been completely defeated, but fortunately, the defeat by non-violent means allowed him to quickly re-establish a new set of ideas. Looking at the figure shrouded in golden light, the fearful respect in his eyes had disappeared, replaced by fanaticism, loyal fanaticism. Lincoln did not know that his behavior had turned Zora into his fanatical loyal fan, and even if he knew, he would not care. In the world composed of sunlight, with the magical use of the space gem, every cell and every space in his body could receive a huge amount of sunlight. In just a few seconds, his body's transformation was comparable to the previous few months. This surge in power gave Lincoln the feeling of being able to control everything again. A wonderful feeling. The golden light was reflected in his pupils. Lincoln just slightly untied the restrictions of his brain a little bit, and he felt a lot of information emerging in his mind. He is omnipotent. He knows everything. His figure was shrouded in golden light. Lincoln glanced in the direction of Zora and instantly saw through everything about him. The starry sky, the godlike figure made Zora in awe, and the golden pupils, that could not be covered by the bright sunlight, made him even more in awe. With just one glance, he felt that he was seen through. This thorough understanding did not make him angry, but made him more loyal and fanatical. He knelt on the ground and shouted humbly, "God, great God." Zora's shouting could not move Lincoln. He withdrew his gaze lightly. Believers? Faith exists in this world, but Lincoln does not need it. With the sunlight alone, he is enough to surpass the gods. Lincoln knew that he could receive the strengthening of the sunlight here indefinitely, until he was completely transcendent, but the golden thread that suddenly flashed in front of him changed his mind. The golden light in his eyes quickly faded, and as a blue ripple expanded, the starry sky was once again covered by the cold reinforced concrete. Everything returned to its original state, except Zora kneeling on the ground. Chapter 14. Fighting the Mage. The bright sunlight has disappeared, but the increase it brought to Lincoln is still there. The surge in power has increased the upper limit of his control over the space gem. With just a thought, his eyes broke through the limitations of space and magic array, and saw Ancient One meditating in Kamatage. The undisguised spatial fluctuation instantly aroused Ancient One's vigilance. She opened her eyes, and looked at Lincoln from thousands of miles away. She shook her head, and waved her hand, covering her figure again. This is not a spatial method, but a sleight of hand. Seeing Ancient One's figure disappear again, Lincoln couldn't help but curl his lips. "You are so stingy. You won't even let me see you. When you looked at me, I didn't say I wouldn't let you look." Although he said so, Lincoln did not continue to look for Ancient One. His eyes turned to the library deep in Kamatage. With one step, he crossed thousands of miles. Kamatage. Just like most people's stereotypes, as a resting place for mages, it is quiet enough, and the Kamatage library, which stores a large number of books, is even more so. Ancient One had set up quite a lot of magic arrays here, to protect those precious books from being stolen by outsiders, but in front of the space gem, these protective magic arrays had no effect. In the quiet library, the azure ripples in the air created a beautiful light, but this dreamy color immediately attracted the attention of the librarian. He put his two fingers into the hanging ring, and with a thought, the magic light rose from his palm. Without any hesitation, the orange-yellow light condensed into a beam, turned into a whip shackle, and shuttled towards Lincoln, who was piercing through the space. Swoosh! The sound of the golden swords rang out, and the light spots fell down, and the golden magic whip accurately locked on Lincoln's arm. The manager's palm shook violently, and with the flash of magic power, an invisible force was transmitted along the whip to Lincoln's arm, trying to oppress his body. The librarian in front of him was not the king that Lincoln knew, but he felt that the old wizard in front of him, who looked like he was dying, was more powerful than that king. As a manager in the ancient times, the only way for the old man who had no leisure and entertainment to pass the time was to study and cast spells. His knowledge may not be as good as that of the future wizard, but when it comes to studying spells, he, who looks old, is able to perform many strange methods. If it were an ordinary person, he would have lost the ability to resist when he was subjected to the special power of the whip, but Lincoln was different. He even had time to carefully experience the power transmitted from the long whip. Old man. Lincoln's performance exceeded his cognition. Looking at Lincoln, who was calm and composed, he couldn't help but flash a trace of surprise and solemnity in his eyes. He had been isolated from the world for many years and didn't know how the outside world was developing, but he knew that the one in front of him was a strong enemy. He was awe-inspiring and had decided not to hold back. Grabbing the long whip bound on Lincoln's arm with one hand, his withered palm suddenly slapped in the air. Crash. The sound of breaking suddenly sounded, and the next moment, Lincoln felt that the world was turned upside down, and the world in front of him was instantly cut into prisms in the broken mirror. It's the mirror space again. Lincoln laughed, and the azure space energy was absorbed from the cosmic cube. He lifted his foot slightly, and then stepped down lightly. Boom. A buzzing sound like a huge bell exploded in the old man's mind. The next moment, he saw the azure ripples spreading rapidly from Lincoln's feet at an incredible speed. The ripples were extremely clear, but the speed of spread was appalling. In just a moment, the mirror space within the range of vision was covered. Under the effect of the unique space energy, the entire mirror space was strengthened to an incredible degree under Lincoln's will, and even the magic of Vishanti could not change it at all. Just like a bug, everything in the space that was originally transformed into complexity and danger solidified in the air. How could it be? The old man's palms kept dancing in front of him, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not make the mirror space change at all. On the contrary, as Lincoln absorbed and utilized more space energy, even though he had not yet mastered the magic of mirror space, the space of this virtual world also changed under his will. The mirror space of the mages follows profound mathematical principles, which allows them to consume less and more easily manipulate space, but Lincoln does not need it. The energy in the space gem is endless, and the upper limit of his superhuman body is even more amazing. It is easy to operate a space at will according to his own ideas. So, in the incredible eyes of the administrator, the originally orderly mirror space began to operate in a way that he could not see through. Mathematics and rules have all failed, and the chaos of thinking has become the main theme here. The last moment, his feet were still on the solid ground, and the next moment he was already flying in the air. The randomness of space and the reorganization of matter. If Lincoln had not deliberately held back, the administrator guarding the library at this time would have been buried in the magma deep in the Earth's core. But even if Lincoln held back, the administrator was at an absolute disadvantage. The disordered space and environment made it impossible for him to make any effective attacks. Even if he wanted to release the mirror space, he would not be able to do so, because his hands were suddenly wrapped in soil and rocks and the water flow was restricted. Steel, water, soil, air, everything in this world seemed to be against him. The messy scene in front of him made his eyes confused, and he couldn't help but fall into it. Until everything calmed down, his figure had been completely locked by Lincoln. The long whip was still tied to Lincoln's arm, but Lincoln just shook it slightly, and the long whip turned into primitive magic and dissipated. Who are you? Even though he had lost his fighting power, the wizard still did not succumb to his situation. Why did you break into the library? Didn't Ancient One tell you? A hint of interest flashed in Lincoln's eyes. He moved his right hand and another burst of energy spread out. Ancient One, you have betrayed your own family. Supreme Lord? The wizard frowned, not understanding Lincoln's actions at all. Do you know the Supreme Lord? Of course I know him. Lincoln nodded, and then he saw a familiar figure squeezing out of the space. Oh, you're finally here. This is a misunderstanding. Ancient One did not look at Lincoln, but waved his hand to cancel the mirror space, allowing several people to return to reality, and explain to the librarian, he is a friend I met outside, and has the reading rights of the library. I forgot to tell you before. Okay. The old wizard moved his body twice, looked at Lincoln carefully, shook his head, and walked to the table. Since he is a friend of the Supreme Lord, you can do whatever you want. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15, The Mystery of Magic. The old wizard walked away muttering something, and at the end he turned his head to look at the two of them. Ignoring the slightly resentful look of the librarian, Ancient One turned around and looked at Lincoln, and at first glance he was attracted by the cosmic cube in his hand. "How do you feel?" "Not bad." Lincoln knew what Ancient One meant. He raised the cosmic cube in his hand. "This container limits the energy of the space stone, but it also allows me to control it better." At this point, Lincoln suddenly paused, then grinned and said, "At least it is very suitable for dealing with the mirror space." "It is indeed very suitable." Ancient One's voice was calm, and there was no ripples because of this. She turned her body slightly, and a portal opened in front of her. "Since you are already here, please feel free to do so. Aren't you going to entertain the guests?" Ancient One paused, turned back and looked at Lincoln with a slight smile. "Guests who are not familiar with this place will not use the space stone to enter the library casually and fight with the administrator. Since you have become the host, you don't need my guidance." After saying that, she stretched out her hand in front of her, and the portal shrank and closed in a spiral shape, and Ancient One's figure disappeared. Lincoln, who was in control of the space stone, could naturally stop the closing of the portal, but he didn't. He just watched Ancient One's figure disappear, and then set his eyes on the books. There are many differences between the mages of Kamataj and the mages of other worlds, but there are some similarities: the exploration and use of knowledge. The seemingly illusory spells such as mirror space can be connected to everything with mathematical principles, and there are just as many other spells. In order to help later generations better master the profound spells, the former spellcasters even wrote a series of explanatory articles for this purpose. These papers were compiled by Ancient One and other mages into books, and kept in the library, and gradually formed the current Kamataj library. These books are the treasures of Kamataj, which can help beginners master magic faster and better, but Lincoln is not very dependent on these books. "But I'm here now." Lincoln's mind moved slightly, and the space energy emanated from the cosmic cube in his palm. Strands of azure light floated freely in the air, rendering the secluded library full of mystery. Using personal will to drive the space energy, the books that were originally quietly displayed on the bookshelf were pulled out one by one. The cover of the book was opened, and the pages rolled up like an air current. Dozens, hundreds, or even more books were hovering in the air, surrounding Lincoln. A hint of the sun's golden color was reflected in his pupils. The fly-sized words were captured by him in an instant, and engraved in the memory deep in his brain. His body floated in the air under the effect of biological stance, and thousands of books gathered into a sphere to include him. The pages of the books kept turning, and one book after another was peeled off from the sphere, and another book after another was merged into it from the bookshelf. Even those banned books restricted by chains were no exception. Under unlimited reading and memory, Lincoln's understanding of magic was quickly completed at an alarming speed. As his superintelligence began to play a role, one by one, the papers that he originally thought were useless collided fiercely in his mind, and the words continued to break up, and then combined into a more in-depth analysis in his mind. 1 minute, 10 minutes, half an hour. Lincoln spent a lot of time memorizing and understanding magic. It was not until the students in the holy land of Kamataj finished a day of practice that the golden light in Lincoln's eyes converged. The books returned to where they were supposed to be, but the knowledge in them had been fully memorized and analyzed by Lincoln. The spells and powers recorded in them were enough to drive ambitious people like Cassilis crazy, but in Lincoln's opinion, it was actually no big deal. As mentioned before, the mages of Kamataj are different from ordinary spells. Their abilities are based on the power of dimensional demons. Lincoln doesn't want to have anything to do with those dimensional demons yet, so all the basic spells he currently has must be modified. The main body of the energy source must be changed. Compared with those demons, he thinks that stars and himself are good choices. Modifying spells is not a simple matter. Unless he unlocks the limitations of his brain again, it will take some time. to complete the modification of spells based on his current situation. If it were him in the past, Lincoln might have chosen the easy way without saying anything, but now it's different. His power is already strong enough. If he doesn't find something else to do, it will be boring. Modifying spells is not difficult to despair, but it just takes some time, which is just right for him. Where did you come from? After sending the book back, Lincoln saw the manager standing in front of him before he took back the space energy. What is it like outside now? I can't tell. Lincoln was silent for a moment and shook his head. You can go out and take a look yourself. Go out and take a look. The old man was also silent. After a long time, he sighed and shook his head. I'm old and can't walk anymore. I'm a little afraid to go out and take a look. After saying that, without waiting for Lincoln to speak, he turned his back and left. Forget it, forget it. Lincoln didn't say anything, but just silently gathered the space energy and disappeared in the flashing light. Klausberg office. Looking at Lincoln, who had come back, Zora's eyes were full of joy. You're back. Yes, I'm back. Lincoln responded casually, returning the cosmic cube in his hand to the instrument. I've used it up, so I'll put it here first, and I'll take it away later. Are you leaving? Zora showed a trace of reluctance in her eyes. That's right. Lincoln nodded as he looked at the golden string that was completely lit and could be plucked at any time. But I will stay here for a while. A few days are almost up. I want to put on a show. Zora didn't know what Lincoln was going to do, but as a believer, he never questioned or asked questions. All he had to do was obey and follow. He waved his hand to let Zora, who was like a follower, leave. Lincoln walked to the window and looked at the sun hanging high outside. He stretched out his right hand and closed his eyes slightly. Magic has different forms of spells, but in the final analysis, their essence is magic. The magic of different natures from demons in different dimensions will affect the effect and strength of the spells, and they need to pay a corresponding price. Lincoln is not prepared to borrow and pay a price, so he needs to transform from the beginning. The first point is to replace the original borrowing object. There are many things in the universe that contain huge energy, but not many meet the requirements. Lincoln himself can also be used as a borrowing object for power, but the sun in the sky is a more conspicuous target. Chapter 16 Actor Lincoln. Absorbing sunlight is now the instinct of Lincoln's body. He can absorb the energy from the sunlight without his control. After his deliberate guidance and control, everything changed. Just like the dust was wiped clean, although Lincoln closed his eyes, the world in front of him became clearer, and even the rays of light were so clear. The light shining on Lincoln will cause the reaction of his body cells in a very short time, and through a series of more complex processes, to continuously strengthen his body. This sunlight is actually not completely absorbed, and a considerable amount of light is reflected and refracted, so Lincoln can still be seen, instead of a pure black outline. But now, as Lincoln uses magic to experiment and modify the energy of sunlight, his body begins to gradually lose color and fall into darkness step by step. Any ordinary person would probably scream at this time, but Zora did not. Knowing the nature of sunlight and vision, he opened his eyes wide and aimed the detection instrument at the darkness. Miracle, miracle. Stars do not have their own will, but they have magnificent energy. Its energy is strong enough and the process of releasing it to the outside is stable enough. With his superhuman body's natural affinity for sunlight, Lincoln successfully completed the first stage of his goal. He completed the first conversion from stellar fusion light energy to magic power. The converted energy was pure, just like the sun. Heat, light, and fire are the properties of the magic power converted by the sun. It will be easier to use the magic power of the sun to cast spells related to the above. A stable and effective conversion method was invented, and Lincoln's figure emerged from the darkness. A communication channel across time and space was established, and a steady stream of energy was absorbed by Lincoln and converted into pure magic power. He didn't even use any professional techniques. The magic power gathered in his palm already contained enough power to destroy a mountain. This amount of energy sounds terrifying, but in fact it is not worth mentioning for the sun. The solar radiation energy received by the Earth is only 1/2.2 billionth of the total radiation energy emitted by the sun to the universe, but this 1/2.2 billionth of energy is the main energy source for the movement of the Earth's atmosphere and the main source of the Earth's light and heat energy. In front of this huge amount of energy, even if Lincoln used his magic to blow up the earth, the energy consumed would be nothing compared to the sun. The dazzling star is a natural treasure trove of nuclear fusion energy, and humans used it too inefficiently in the past, but now the situation is somewhat different. Looking at the ball of light in his hand, that contained tremendous energy, Lincoln couldn't help but smile. He looked up at the mountains, covered with continuous snow in the distance, and pushed the ball of light in his hand. Whoosh! The terrifying heat instantly melted the glass into a circle of orange-red cracks. The sharp cold wind rushed through the room, but the small bit of light went straight up into the sky against the cold wind. The snowy green mountains were desolate, but after a short delay, the desolation was torn apart. Boom. It was like a small nuclear bomb being detonated. The light, heat, and powerful shock wave completely melted the snow on the mountain peaks. Under the surging airwaves and the raging shock wave, the glass supported by the steel frame was instantly shattered. The warm wind swirled the humid mist and filled the entire office in an instant. Not bad, not bad. Looking at the snow on the mountaintop in the distance melting and revealing its original color, Lincoln smiled with satisfaction. He exhaled a breath of ice, and the condensed ice crystals climbed between the steel frames, sealing the exposed office again. The surging airflow gradually subsided. Only then did Zora, who was an ordinary person, dare to walk forward cautiously. Ever since the pure light ball was condensed by Lincoln, he had retreated behind. Although he had no instruments to detect the energy contained in the magic ball, the instinct of life made him tremble from the bottom of his heart. He chose to hide behind the bunker and watch the inconspicuous light ball burst out with great power. A very small volume released a lot of energy and great destructive power. This was something he couldn't do with energy weapons, but Lincoln did it and controlled this terrifying energy with just one hand. Zora was not the only one who saw this scene. Schmidt, who had left earlier, also saw it clearly. As an ambitious man, he installed surveillance throughout Klausberg, including his own office. On the surveillance screen, he saw everything clearly, whether it was Lincoln controlling the cosmic cube by himself, or condensing the terrifying light ball with one hand. He saw it clearly. Schmidt's muscles trembled, and his heart seemed to be tightly grasped by an invisible big hand. He felt a sense of suffocation. Lincoln's strength made him see no chance of resistance. The psychological pressure of wanting to resist, but not knowing where to start, was like a mountain hanging over his head, wanting to destroy him. The first phase of the magic plan was completed smoothly, beyond Lincoln's imagination. The foundation has been completed. The next thing to do is to make some specific modifications to the remaining spells based on this magic. For example, the spell of Sitorak's Scarlet Chain, which requires the power of Sitorak, can be adjusted so that it can be cast using the energy of sunlight. This may take time, but Lincoln has no shortage of time. Just take it slowly. Now, compared to the transformation and design of new spells, he needs to perform a play first. He has already set the script. He is a sniper of the 107th Infantry Regiment. Unfortunately, he was selected for the experiment. During the experiment, he was forced to contact the cosmic cube, but he did not die like ordinary people, but disappeared completely with the light. Zora's comment on the experiment, the cosmic cube, will indiscriminately kill almost all life that approaches it, but some may not die, but just disappear. This play will be faithfully recorded and stored, and leaked to Captain America through Bucky and other series of designs. Maybe Steve will leave with this videotape, apply for an allowance for him, and when fighting Red Skull in the future, he will suddenly think of a way to use the cosmic cube to deal with Red Skull. Lincoln will destroy all videos related to himself, except for this video that can prove that he is missing instead of dead. Then this will be a very perfect plan. After all, no one would have thought that the Red Skull, the supreme ruler of Hydra, and Zora would jointly stage a good show. He was not going to act out a scene with Steve in person. He just couldn't wait to pluck the golden string and see what would happen. The first time always attracted men. Chapter 17. Popular. The golden string vibrated, and countless golden lights radiated from it, occupying the world in front of Lincoln. After a few seconds, the golden light gradually faded, and then the noisy sounds of the street came into his ears. A new world. Standing on the street, Lincoln's nostrils moved slightly, and countless smells were inhaled into his nasal cavity, and then a lot of information emerged and analyzed in his mind. Sound, smell, vision. What do these three mean? Lincoln mastered the environment he was in a short moment. Xianjin during the Republic of China. Xianjin. What world is this during the Republic of China? Hey, don't just stand there, you're blocking the road. Lincoln was thinking, when a voice suddenly came from behind him, accompanied by a vague sound of wind. Without a trace of hesitation, Lincoln's body slightly tilted, and one hand popped out casually, and his palm firmly grasped the wrist that was slapping him like an eagle's claw. Bare-chested, coarse cloth vest, with a headscarf tied on the top of the head and a cart behind him. Lincoln saw at a glance the identity of these coolies, cart pushers. Lincoln was very strong. Even if he had no intention of hurting anyone, the strength in his hands could still make an ordinary coolie scream out in pain. He paused for a few seconds, and the group of foot coolers surrounded him. Who are you? You are occupying the street and hurting people. Let go. Lincoln ignored them, but narrowed his eyes at a foot coolie in the crowd. Zheng Liangchen? Zheng Liangchen? Hearing this name, the head of the foot coolie was also stunned, and then turned to look at a coolie in the crowd. Xiao Zheng, do you know this person? Zheng Liangchen was confused. I don't know him. He really doesn't know me, and I have only met him once before. Lincoln smiled, and pushed the foot coolie who was about to kneel down in his hand away. Be careful next time, don't push anyone you see. Lincoln retained more than 99% of his strength, but the remaining little was still enough to make the foot cooler, who was already weak from pain, look ashamed. Reaching out to take his men back, the boss of the foot trade could not help but reveal a trace of deep thought in his eyes. Are you from the martial arts industry? Not really, just a passerby. Lincoln waved his hand, then turned and walked into the crowd, leaving the boss of the foot trade silent. Boss, what's wrong? Nothing, I just think that guy's not simple. Zheng Liangchen, who is still working in the foot trade. The plot has not yet begun. Lincoln looked up at the sky, was silent for a while, and reached out to grab a hawker beside him. Do you know where Cheeselin is? I know. It's on the middle street of the German concession. Hey, that sign is so bright. Lincoln didn't listen to the hawker's words. With nothing in his pocket, he took the opportunity to run away, while the hawker was explaining enthusiastically, leaving no trace behind. When the hawker came to his senses, Lincoln had already disappeared, leaving him with no interest in his eyes, and even spit on the ground. Not a penny. God and God, is Lincoln unwilling to give a tip? That's because he is poor, and has no money in his pocket. Oh, that's not right. He still has some dollars in his pocket, with the words 1940 printed on them. Walking in the crowd, looking at the people passing by, Lincoln couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It would be great if a thief could come and steal my money at this time. Borrow it, borrow it. As soon as the voice fell, a short figure beside him pushed and ran past, disappearing in the crowd. Although it was only a momentary contact, Lincoln still showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Here I come. Street corner. The short and flexible Xiao glanced at the crowd outside, and then he had time to open his hands to see what he had found. Small change with an unknown price? Don't want a wallet? Take out the money, throw away the wallet, and there is still a stack of foreign currency? Looking at the foreign currency with the word 20 printed on it in his hand, Xiao was stunned for a moment, and repeatedly looked at it in the sunlight. Since he entered this business, he has stolen money many times, but this is the first time he has stolen such a beautifully made banknote. And this 20, could it be worth $20? Thinking of this, Xiao's heart couldn't help but tremble. He spread out his hands and counted them one by one, counting out more than a dozen banknotes. $300? Xiao was completely confused. He looked out again, stuffed the money into his arms in a hurry, and ran to his nest with his whole body curled up. In this era, even a thief can't do it without joining a group. He is organized, and he has to go back to find those big guys. However, Xiao, who thought he was acting secretly, had no idea that the people whose money he stole were watching his performance quietly in the sky. Xiao, why did you come back so early today? Did you catch a big job? Ziosi looked up and then looked towards the yard. Where's the boss? In the house, but the boss is in a bad mood today. If you don't have a big job, you'll have to bear it. Bullshit. Ziosi snorted coldly, crossed his arms and walked in. People's hearts are not united, even if they are in the same den of thieves. There are gaps between each other, and because of more direct economic interests, the relationship between them will only be worse than that of ordinary people. Seeing Ziosi walk into the door, the man who blocked his way was even more certain that Ziosi must have gotten something good. His eyes immediately turned red, but he said disdainfully, "You are so arrogant, it's just a bargain, I'll give it to you." Inside the door, the boss had already heard the noise outside. Seeing the door curtain open, he lifted up the big cigarette on the table and took a puff, then looked at Ziosi with a comfortable face. "Tell me, what good thing did you bring me? Here it is." Ziosi walked forward with a flattering face and took out the stack of 15 foreign currencies from his arms. 15 in total, all foreign money. Foreign currency? Hearing Ziosi's words, the boss also became excited. He grabbed the banknotes and flipped them back and forth against the light. The more he flipped through them, the more surprised he was. The basic skill of a thief is to identify items. Just from the touch and style, the boss can recognize that these banknotes in his hand are definitely not low quality goods. The feel and style are very exquisite. He hadn't noticed the issue date on the banknotes, but he had already determined that the banknotes in his hand were most likely real. Only 15. Did you hide anything? No, no. Ziosi shook his head hurriedly. How dare I take this foreign money? If someone comes to me, I'll be killed. Come to my door? The boss snorted disdainfully. Even if the King of Heaven comes, I can make him lie down in this den of thieves. Really? Note, if you can't learn Chinese martial arts, you can already learn magic, so why play martial arts? Thanks to the director of a certain orphanage for the reward of 100 starting coins. Chapter 18. Is this for martial arts training? The voice came before the person arrived. The word really immediately made the thief leader feel like he was facing a great enemy. He grabbed the banknotes and stuffed them into his arms, then looked outside vigilantly. Who? Come out and talk. Shouldn't you come out and talk? He grabbed the throat of the thief who stayed in the hospital with one hand, so that he dared not move at all. Lincoln's face was calm, as if it was not him who was surrounded by the crowd. Hearing this, the thief leader finally reacted at this time. Realizing that he had lost his composure in front of his men, the thief leader angrily kicked open the door and walked out. He saw Lincoln, who was surrounded by people, at a glance, and he was immediately furious. It was you who broke into my territory? You took my things. How can you say that I broke into your territory? I just came to get my things back. Lincoln chuckled, waved his hand casually, and the thief, who was strangled by the neck, was thrown into the air and smashed a pile of rubbish in the corner of the yard with a bang. One of the thieves stepped forward and tried to breathe, then looked at the thief leader. Boss, he's still alive. Hearing that his men were still alive, the thief leader's face looked a little better, but only a little. Facing Lincoln, who rushed to his house, he was not willing to fight with Lincoln. The little strength Lincoln showed made the thief leader look up to him, but now the yard was full of his men. How could he lose? Thinking of this, the thief leader was not anxious for a while. Looking at your posture, you are a martial artist? A martial artist? A martial artist? Hearing the thief leader's words, Lincoln couldn't help but fall silent, but his silent attitude made the thief leader more determined in his guess, and his whole spirit became excited. I've heard that everyone in your martial arts can fight, but I didn't have a chance before. This time I want to see how good you are. Guys, come on, kill him. A low-class thief killing a high-class warrior. What an exciting ambition. Just thinking about it made the thief leader tremble all over. However, he was completely immersed in his own world and didn't notice Lincoln's changing eyes. Strength should be limited, and Lincoln agreed with this statement, so he has always imposed this kind of restriction on himself to prevent himself from completely degenerating into the superhero in the comics. But sometimes, this restriction will be lifted, such as now, when a group of people want to surround and kill him. The thief thought he was a martial artist, but to be frank, those martial artists were not taken seriously by Lincoln. Who is he? Superman. And a Superman who has been exposed to the sun for so long. For such a long time, his body has been strengthened to an incredible degree, which refers to more than just physical fitness. The human body structure determines their weaknesses and strengths. The so-called martial arts are nothing more than routines and techniques for attacking weaknesses. As a superman with a super brain, Lincoln can block the opponent's attack and attack weaknesses, even if he lets his body instinctively do it himself, which is crushing ordinary humans. Humans have limits, but Superman does not. It was not known whether it was the sticks in their hands or the crowd that gave them courage. After a loud shout, the three hands who only dared to steal on the street rushed towards Lincoln like wild dogs with red eyes. But the next moment, they understood that there was a gap between humans and non-humans. Lincoln did not make any extra movements. He just silently stretched the biological force field a little, and then everyone was horrified to see that the knives, guns, sticks, and clubs that were thrown out were bounced back, as if they hit a transparent head wall. Under this powerful reaction force, their palms were numb with pain, but Lincoln moved at this time. His figure was as light as a gust of wind. Everyone only saw a phantom flashing, and then everything went black in front of their eyes. They lost all control of their bodies, and fell to the ground. From the time the thief spoke to the end of the battle, only 3 seconds had passed. The battle ended so quickly, that it was more appropriate to call it a crushing. It was not until the last thug standing staggered to the ground that the thief suddenly woke up. In front of him was a group of his subordinates whose lives and deaths were unknown. The thief's previous spirit had been extinguished without a single spark left. Looking at Lincoln, his legs trembled, and there was only one thought in his mind. Is this a martial artist? When did martial arts become so powerful? Have I been abandoned by the times? You. The thief looked at Lincoln and was so scared that he couldn't even say a complete sentence. His face had an expression of a loved one's death, and the forced smile was uglier than crying. He raised his hand and swung it in his face. I really don't know how to recognize 2.58 million. Don't worry about it. Lincoln looked at the thief with a flat look, as if he was looking at a dead person without any expression. You owe me money. You should pay it back to me. Okay. The thief nodded repeatedly, stretched out his hand to take out the banknotes, and handed them to Lincoln. His legs were weak, and he even wanted to kneel down. Are you kidding me? Lincoln didn't even look at the banknotes in his hand. This is a US dollar bill from 1940. How old is it now? You took my US dollars worth $500, and now you are using fake ones to fool me? $500? Hearing Lincoln's words, the thief was stunned. He looked at the banknotes in Lincoln's hand, and then looked at Lincoln, who was serious. At this time, he finally understood. What ZOC got a big job. This was a trap set by others, and he asked for a full $500 as soon as he opened his mouth. What is the concept of $500? In this era, as long as you don't touch pornography, gambling or drugs, this money is enough for a family of 5 to spend normally in Beijing for 5 years. Even if he is the thief leader in this area, the family assets accumulated over the years are only $500. The thief even suspected that Lincoln had been eyeing his family assets for a long time, so he set up this. He was very angry in his heart, but facing Lincoln, who defeated dozens of people alone, no matter how unwilling and angry he was, he could only swallow his anger. He didn't even dare to bargain, fearing that Lincoln would change his mind and beat him to death on the spot, and then he wouldn't even have the chance to buy his life. The thief took out the family fortune he had accumulated over the years and was angry in his heart. Just wait. I must find someone to kill you, and I swear I won't be a human being if I don't kill you. Hula $500, most of which were in the bank, and what was given was just a deposit receipt, only a few $dozen in cash, but even so, the collision sound of these dollars was crisp. Thank you. No, you're welcome. Thinking that he had escaped by luck, the thief couldn't help but relax in his heart, and then saw Lincoln shaking his head slightly. You misunderstood. I meant thank you for helping me get the money out, so I don't have to look for it myself. Hearing this, the thief opened his eyes wide in horror and pointed at Lincoln in disbelief. You. He who kills shall be killed. Lincoln's calm voice rang in his ears, and then he heard the sound of his neck bones breaking under great pressure, and his vision gradually became chaotic. I thought you knew. Chapter 19, Cheeseland. From today on, we will stop the unlimited supply of bread. Perspective is a good thing. It allows Lincoln to squeeze out all the money from the thief without having to do it himself. Banknotes are a problem, but not a big problem. A few dozen dollars in cash are enough for him to use for a while. After all, the purchasing power of dollars is still there at this time. With $500, Lincoln left the silent den of thieves. This time, no blind thief dared to touch Lincoln's pocket. Cheeseland, the most famous Western restaurant in Cheyenne, provides free bread, which is also the only cheap thing in Cheyenne. In fact, it is not a cheap thing, because if you want the waiters to serve free bread, you must first have a decent outfit and order a meal or drink. This is the rule of Cheeseland. Lincoln decided to teach the young store owner a lesson today. As for the reason, does a bored Superman need a reason to do something? Cheeseland, I've thought about it. I want to become famous, but I won't teach you the real thing, Chenshi said calmly. Hearing Chenshi's words, Zheng Shanao, the top martial artist in Cheyenne, couldn't help but smile. Cheeseland's bread is free. This is the only cheap thing in Cheyenne. In addition to your nod, there is also an old rule that if you have defeated 8 martial arts schools, you can gain a foothold in Cheyenne. So far, no one has defeated 5. No one has eaten 5 pieces of Cheeseland's bread. 10 more loaves of bread. Zheng Shanao, Chenshi. The sudden call of business interrupted their conversation. They couldn't help but turn their heads and saw that on the table beside them, Lincoln was eating large loaves of bread elegantly and quickly. Chenshi didn't say anything, but Zheng Shanao suddenly became interested. He counted the empty baskets on the table carefully, then looked at Lincoln. 19 baskets in total. You have a good appetite, little brother. Just so. Lincoln smiled. I just came to teach the head of this restaurant a lesson. Some rules cannot be set randomly, otherwise, something will happen. Little brother, you can't eat a few. Zheng Shanao suddenly laughed and pointed to the ceiling. Cheeseland is the top Western restaurant in Cheyenne. The bread that anyone can buy for a meal here can make a person die of hunger. I don't think so. Lincoln smiled and put the empty basket aside and raised his hand again. 20 loaves of bread. At this time, Zheng Shanao, who had been focusing on Lincoln, realized that the 10 large loaves of bread that were enough to make a person die of hunger were all eaten in just a few words. A large loaf of bread weighs 1 pound, and 10 of them weigh a full 10 pounds. Just like that, it was gone in less than a minute, and he didn't even see any rise and fall in Lincoln's belly. Zheng Shanao, the big eater, had also seen it when he was young, but for someone who ate 10 kilograms of noodles in 1 minute, to be frank, he suspected that Lincoln was not a human being at all. Zheng Shanao was lost in thought for a moment. The waiter of the restaurant also came up with an unpleasant look on his face. I'm sorry, sir, our kitchen has run out of bread. Really? Lincoln wiped his hands and smiled at the waiter. I doubt whether you have run out of bread or you are unwilling to follow the rules of your restaurant. The rules of Cheeseland are set by you. As long as you can eat it, you can have as much bread as you want. What? You can't afford it now? At this point, seeing that the waiter's eyes were already a little angry, Lincoln changed the subject again. But it doesn't matter. Maybe your kitchen is not well stocked. I can understand that. I will come again tomorrow and tell the kitchen of your restaurant that I will eat 500 of them tomorrow. Let them prepare the ingredients, otherwise take down the sign obediently. By the way, don't expect to fool me with bread from outside. I can eat it. Cheeseland's bread is not easy to make. Lincoln has seen their kitchen. 500 breads mean that they have to spend the whole morning on it. The equipment is like this, and it cannot be changed by human power. The day after tomorrow, his request will be increased to 1,000. Unless they are willing to not receive any guests for a day, the only bargain in Cheyenne will disappear within 3 days. Chenshi should be grateful to him. At least with Lincoln, he doesn't need to force himself to eat 5 large loaves of bread, which would make him feel very full. Pushing the untouched medium rare steak in front of him, Lincoln stood up and was about to leave. Zheng Shanao, who had been silent all the time, suddenly called out to him, "Little brother, are you willing to stay and chat with me?" Chat? What to talk about? Lincoln unceremoniously pulled the stool next to Chenchi and sat down. One of you is the top martial artist, and the other is a martial artist who is going to open a martial arts school. What can we talk about? Then there are a lot of things to talk about. Zheng Shanao smiled and pointed at Chenchi. You have finished eating the cheese-lin bread, and now Master Chen can't even eat bread. Don't worry. Lincoln waved his hand. They must have more in the kitchen. After I leave, Master Chen will be able to eat it. Zheng Shanao laughed and became more interested. Little brother is also an interesting person. What should I call you? What are you doing in Xianjin? My name is Lincoln. I feel bored coming to Xianjin, so I just wandered around here and saw if I could get anything done. Doing things? Are you also opening a martial arts school like Master Chen? How can you tell? There are few people in this world who can have such an appetite, except those who practice martial arts. And I see that there is a force in your every move. That is not something that ordinary people can use. So I made a guess. Am I right? I wasn't right just now, but I'm right now. Lincoln laughed. I didn't think about opening a martial arts school, but maybe now. Anyway, I have nothing to do, so I might as well have some fun. You want to open a martial arts school too? Zheng Shanao's eyes flashed a gleam. Then I wonder what sector school brother Lin belongs to. No sector school. No sector school? Zheng Shanao was even more interested. There are often only two explanations for no sector school. One is that there is really no sector school, and you have learned a little bit from everywhere, and are just doing small things. The other is that you start from scratch, and have no sector school yet. Zheng Shanao looked Lincoln up and down, and felt that he was not the first type, so he said, why don't you go to my martial arts gym to practice? Maybe it will work. I can practice, but what? I still have to continue to practice in this gym. Okay. Zheng Shanao immediately made the decision and paid the meal fee. At the end, he looked at Chenchi who had been silent all the time. Master Chen is here. Why don't we take a look together? Okay. Chenchi nodded, and the three of them went out immediately. When they walked to the door, they saw the restaurant staff hurriedly hanging a sign outside. From today on, this restaurant will stop providing unlimited bread. Seeing this scene, Zheng Shanao immediately laughed. Brother Lin is very capable. You are the first one in so many years to force Shilin to change the brand. Just so. Chapter 20. Is this martial arts? After a while, we arrived at the governor's mansion. Is this your house? Yes, it's an old house from the past. It's quite old, full of history, and suitable for an old man like me. Zheng Shanao said as he pushed open the door of a lobby. The sparse light couldn't illuminate the room as bright as day, but it was enough to see things. On both sides were various weapons and protective gear, and it was obvious that they were well prepared. Take a look. You can use anything you need. That's not necessary. Lincoln shook his head, stood at the door, and didn't go in, but turned to look at the empty land beside him. It's a pity to smash the finely paved floor tiles, so I'll just use the yard outside, where I can see clearly. As he said that, he stood in the middle of the open space and stretched out 4 fingers. I have summarized 4 moves: 1 punch, 1 kick, 1 look, and 1 breath. No rules. No rules at all. This was the first thought in Zheng Shanao's mind. Although there are thousands of strange ways in martial arts, there is still a general outline in general. As the saying goes, no matter how many changes there are, they still follow the same principle. But even with his years of experience as a martial arts master, he could not find any connection or rules in the 4 moves Lincoln summarized. 1 punch and 1 kick could be understood, but the look and breath at the end, if it weren't for the expression on Lincoln's face, Zheng Shanao almost thought Lincoln was joking with him. He did not interrupt Lincoln's performance, but he was already a little disappointed at this time, and the rest was only a little bit of interest. As for Chenchi on the side, he had already pursed his lips tightly at this time. It was not easy to laugh. Whether it was the right occasion or the wrong identity, Chenchi could only use the action of pursing his lips to express his disapproval of Lincoln's so-called moves. Zheng Shanao and the others did not speak, but their body expressions and even eyes betrayed their true thoughts, which could not be hidden from Lincoln's eyes, but he just smiled indifferently. Standing still, Lincoln loosened his shoulders and elbows, and then raised his hand to send out a simple straight punch. This punch had no power or explosion. To Zheng Shanao and the others, it looked even worse than the cuckold punch used by street thugs in a fight. However, it was this straightforward punch that shattered their worldview after years of martial arts training. Bang! The biological force field was released, and the power contained in Lincoln's body gushed out in an instant, like a tsunami, and like a volcanic eruption, erupting with enough power to destroy everything. The air was squeezed and burst under the action of this fist force, and the rolling sound of air explosions continued. The layers of airwaves even lifted a layer of grass on the ground. The airwave rushed out without any hindrance, and at once it smashed the courtyard wall made of bricks and stones a few meters away. Even if it was not in the direct impact range of this airwave, Zheng Shanao and the others could not control their bodies. They only felt their bodies shaken, and were pushed a few steps away. The white airwave rolled in the air like clouds and mist, and it calmed down after a long time. At this time, the originally clean and tidy courtyard was already in a mess. Broken grass and trees were scattered everywhere, the soil was cracked in a cone and turned far away, and the rubble of the collapsed wall was piled up. Through the gaps in the courtyard wall, the servants' faces were vaguely terrified. On the side, Zheng Shanao and the other man were not injured, but their clothes were disheveled, and they were a little dusty from the dust and grass carried by the airwave. But at this time, they didn't care about these anymore. The two looked at the collapsed wall in the distance, and then looked at Lincoln, who was calm, and felt as if something in their hearts was broken. Is this martial arts? When did martial arts become like this? How come I don't know? The two people whose worldviews were shattered were a little stunned and didn't know what to say. Lincoln's performance did not stop. The next move is a kick. As he said, he raised his foot slightly and then stepped on the already devastated soil like a hydrogen bomb. Boom. The power controlled by the biological force field was accurately poured into the soil layer underground. As the force field restrictions were lifted, the earth shook. It was like a dragon turning over. The originally flat land cracked at this moment. The cracks that seemed to lead to the abyss were torn open forcefully, and the shockwaves spread far away along the soil layer. At this moment, half of Xianjin felt a tremor like an earthquake, and the small courtyard at the epicenter had completely collapsed into a ruin. The rumbling sound of collapse sounded, and the airwaves mixed with dust slapped Zheng Shanao and his face like slaps. In the dust, the two were completely stunned. They couldn't help but look at each other, their eyes full of confusion. At this moment, they seemed to understand each other's eyes, as if they had telepathy. Is the martial arts you learned like this? I'm not. Me neither. Then why is his martial arts like this? I don't know. The two fell into silence again. They couldn't help but wonder if their master or ancestor had kept back a few tricks when teaching people. Otherwise, this is unreasonable. Why is other people's martial arts comparable to immortal arts, but their own martial arts are so inferior? The two of them were thinking, and Lincoln's voice came again. After a punch and a kick, it's a look and a breath. Unlike the previous two moves, these two remaining moves are not something that ordinary people can do. You must be a genius. Hearing Lincoln's words, Zheng Shanao's eyes twitched twice again. They wanted to say that the previous two moves of a punch and a kick were not something that ordinary people could practice, but after moving their lips a few times, they still closed them. The most important thing about this look is the control ability. You need to feel the energy in your body and control it to gather and merge into your eyes. Then, you can stare someone to death with a single look, just like this. Lincoln said. His eyes flashed, and a red light exploded. A laser with a temperature of thousands of degrees broke through the air in an instant. The scorching light melted the copper and iron that fell on the ground into a pool of orange-red molten iron in just a few breaths. The air around the molten iron was burning and twisted. The molten iron, which emitted a dazzling orange light, flowed slowly like magma, and gradually began to cool down in the heat of Lincoln's withdrawal. Looking at the molten iron on the ground, Zheng Shanao and Shenchi said, "Abba abba abba." It's almost the same as a glance. The difference of a breath is that the energy is gathered in the chest, throat and even mouth, and then blown out. Lincoln explained while blowing out a breath of cold air. In an instant, the weather in early summer was reversed. The icy cold air, which was more biting than the cold winter in December, spread out from the governor's mansion. In the cold, the water vapor in the air even condensed, and turned into ice crystals and snowflakes that fell down. On the ground, the molten iron that was originally cooling slowly cooled rapidly under this low temperature, and even cracked due to the freezing. In the courtyard, Zheng Shanao, who had a little frost on his eyebrows and hair, shivered in the cold, but was unwilling to move a step. He just looked up at the sun in the sky and the falling snow. This is not martial arts, right? This must not be martial arts. Chapter 21 Martial Arts Hall. After all, young people are still strong. Chen Shi did not speak. Zheng Shanao spoke first. Brother Lin, Master Lin, please stop using your magic. My old bones can't stand it anymore. Lincoln looked at Zheng Shanao, who was shaking like a vibrator, and nodded. Then the BO force field suddenly expanded. In just a moment, the chill disappeared, and even the snowflakes that kept condensing in the air stopped and melted away under the sunlight. The change from cold to hot was so rapid that Zheng Shanao, a martial artist, couldn't stand it. His nose itched and he sneezed. He rubbed his nose awkwardly, looked around, and a bitter smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It's a pity for this courtyard house. I don't know how much time and resources will be spent on renovating it. It's just time. There is plenty of it. Master Lin is a young man. Zheng Shanao snorted twice. For an old man like me, even one day is precious. I was competitive in my early years. I don't know how many hidden dangers are buried in my body. I'm happy to live one more day. By the way, how old is Master Lin this year? Me. I'm 22 this year. 22. Hearing this, both Zheng Shanao and Chen Shi showed a hint of self-mockery on their faces. He has all these skills at the age of 22. It seems that I'm just a person who sits in a well and looks at the sky. Lincoln smiled and didn't speak, but Zheng Shanao continued. Master Lin said before that he was going to open a martial arts school in Xianjin. Is it true? I have this idea. Lincoln nodded. Of course, what he was going to teach was not the routines of this world or the way of Superman becoming stronger. He was just going to use the people of this world to conduct an experiment on the new version of magic. He now had the super soldier serum and many spells of camouflage. It happened that he could not use the golden string to leave this world in a short time, so he might as well do an interesting little experiment. The martial arts hall was a good choice. At least the name sounded better than some biological laboratory. Hearing Lincoln's affirmation, Zheng Shanao's eyes lit up slightly, and he continued to ask, then I wonder if Master Lin is going to teach for real, or just for fame. Lincoln did not answer directly, but just smiled slightly. Fame is like a floating cloud to me. Hearing this, Zheng Shanao and his partner, who had been moving for fame all their lives, could not help but show a touch of emotion on their faces, and their attitudes were much more respectful. Lincoln not only had high-level martial arts, but also did not pursue fame and fortune. In their hearts, the only word to describe him was a hermit master, teaching the real thing. This is almost Zheng Shanao's last obsession. The older people get, the more they want to leave a name for themselves after death. As the top star in the martial arts industry, Zheng Shanao, who knows the current situation of the martial arts industry, has set his sights on teaching the real thing. Originally, Chen Shi, the successor of Wing Chun, was his candidate, but Chen Shi refused. Fortunately, Lincoln appeared. If Lincoln's skills can shock the world, and he is the first to stand the pipe in Xianjin, he will also be remembered in history. What a temptation it will be. He is old, and many things that will happen in the future will be things after his death. Leaving a heavy mark in the history books is his only thought now. Even if it means losing his reputation as the top star of the martial arts school, it is worth it. Thinking of this, Zheng Shanao's smile became more kind. Master Lin is highly skilled. Since he is willing to pass on his skills, I, as the top martial artist, should show my ability. No need. Lincoln, who knew what Zheng Shanao was going to say, raised his hand to interrupt him. Not everyone can learn my skills. I even doubt whether there is anyone else in the world who can learn them. Opening up a wide range of doors is not suitable for me. Hanging a sign is enough. For the rest, if I can find an apprentice, he can do it for me. Looking at Lincoln, Zheng Shanao hesitated for a moment, and finally nodded. Okay, Master Lin, if you have any other requirements besides this, you can come to me. If I can, I will arrange it for you. Got it? Lincoln nodded and stepped over the broken threshold. "See you later." Watching Lincoln walk out of the gate of the governor's mansion, Zheng Shanao made a few gestures with his drooping fingers, and then turned to look at Chenxi. "Since you are unwilling to teach me for real, I won't make things difficult for you. According to the old rules, you can open a martial arts school if you find a local apprentice in Xianjin and kick 8 martial arts schools. Think it through and decide whether you want to do it or not." After saying that, Zheng Shanao patted Chenxi on the shoulder, got on the car at the door, and left the governor's mansion, which was no longer habitable. The head of the martial arts industry said that the sign of the 20th martial arts school in Xianjin was quickly hung up. The movement was so small that people who had not been paying attention would not even know that a new martial arts school had been hung up. The 20th martial arts school, this is what was written on the plaque, and it also attracted a lot of discussion among the martial arts industry. Zheng Shanao has been the head of the industry for many years, and the people in the martial arts industry are still quite convinced of his vision. They only care about the origin of this newly appeared martial arts school. Do you think it has something to do with the strange phenomenon that day? Some smart people thought of the day when the earth dragon turned over first, and then the snow fell in broad daylight. But as soon as he said this, he was refuted by others. Impossible. That's right, whether it's an earthquake or snow, they are all serious celestial phenomena. In the words of those foreigners, it's science. What does it have to do with humans? Do you think there is anyone who can cause earthquakes and snow by himself? Have you read too many comic books? It's just an association. The person who spoke first looked a little embarrassed. Didn't they say that there were outsiders coming in and out of the governor's mansion that day? We have already checked it out. A boxer of a small style from other places should also want to make a name for himself in Xianjin. Now I heard that he is preparing to settle down in Xianjin. Another one. You think too much. There are so many boxers who have challenged the gym over the years. A mere small southern style of martial arts is nothing. In my opinion, even if it is the 20th martial arts gym, the signboard will not last long. Maybe someone will come to challenge the gym someday, and then the plaque will be smashed. That will make us enemies. Are there not many enemies in Xianjin? They can fight to the death for a piece of money. The martial artists were talking about it, but most of them were not optimistic about the newly emerged martial arts school. However, Lincoln did not care about it. He just looked at the red shadow selling tea on the roadside with a hint of interest in his eyes. Although it is not often used, the inheritance of camouflage has a complete set of identification techniques that can accurately judge a person's spiritual will. This kind of spiritual will is not bravery or anything else, but simply the degree of fit with the mysterious element of magic. Only with the degree of fit can it be possible to control magic, rather than being controlled by magic. Lincoln did not expect that his luck was so good. He just wandered around the street and found a person who fit him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Provocation. It's fate. I now believe in the theory of destiny in those novels. Looking at the tea girl in red in the distance, Lincoln couldn't help but smile. He walked along the street for a while, and with his eyes, he almost saw half of Xianjin. With such a large population base, the one he got along with was the one in front of him. There are only a few characters in the movie Master. The one in front of him who will become Jing Liangchen's girlfriend in the future is one of them. Unfortunately, he may not have a girlfriend now. Lincoln paused for a moment, then sat on a wooden stool, stretched out his hand, and slapped out a silver dollar, saying, "Give me a bowl of tea, pick the most expensive one." The tea girl Zillion looked at the silver dollars on the rough table, was stunned for a moment, and then said with some stammering, Too many, I can't find the change." "Then just leave it here first." Lincoln waved his hand casually. "Don't say more, I have plenty of money." Seeing Lincoln's attitude, Zillion clenched the dollars in her hand, then turned and left. After a while, she brought the old tea to Lincoln. "This is the most expensive tea here, but even if you drink it 50 times, it won't cost $1. It doesn't matter." Lincoln smiled, picked up the tea, and took a sip. The taste was a bit strange, not his favorite, so he stopped after just one sip. Seeing that Lincoln didn't seem to like the taste of tea, Zilin walked back helplessly and took out the dollar again. "Since you are not used to it, I'll give it back to you." Lincoln didn't take the money, but just looked at Zilin and smiled. "Are you interested in learning martial arts?" "Learning martial arts? I can't do it." Zilin hesitated for a few breaths and shook her head. "I'm so old. I'm still very poor. I have to set up a tea stall. How can I learn martial arts? These are not problems." Lincoln shook his head and said, "I just ask. If you are interested in learning, I can teach you." Zilin didn't say anything. Lincoln just smiled. "When you think it through, go to the 20th martial arts school to find me. There are not many opportunities to change your destiny in this world. You have to think it through." After speaking, Lincoln turned around and left. The suitable candidate has been found, and the next thing to deal with is the opening of the martial arts school. Zheng Shanao, the top player, saved Lincoln a lot of things, but some things are hard to avoid, such as the visits from the martial arts school people and the internal exchanges of the martial arts industry. The next day, before Zilin came, the owners of 19 martial arts schools in Xianjin came together. Some of them were people Lincoln had seen before, but many were people he had never seen before. Lincoln sat quietly on the main seat, and even when he saw famous martial arts figures among the crowd, he did not move at all, but just smiled. "Everyone, my martial arts school is open today. If you want to visit, just visit. You brought your martial arts boxer here. Are you here to learn from me? Master Lin, you are worrying too much." Zhao Guantu, a woman with quite a lot of skills, spoke first. "We all opened martial arts schools in Xianjin, so we are inevitably a little curious, so we came to take a look. I'm not targeting you. It doesn't matter." Lincoln put down the tools in his hands. "If you want to see my skills, it's fine, but my school will not hold back when we stand on the stage. Although there is no danger to life during the exchange, it is common to get disabled. If you really want to see it, you have to be prepared to lie in bed for the rest of your life." Lincoln's impolite attitude made Zhao Guanzu's eyes change a little, but she still forced a smile on her face. Lincoln was a person strongly recommended by Zheng Shanao. With her current status and position, she could not tear her face with Zheng Shanao. Before she understood Lincoln's background, she had always been very cautious in doing things. Zhao Rang thought she did a good job, but in fact, Lincoln hated people like her who had no power and only moved things behind her back. He would never be nice to her. The martial arts hall opened its doors and invited the troupe. This was the rule. Lincoln wanted to break this rule, but there was no pole dancing troupe in Xianjin that he liked at that time. Even movies were black and white and boring. In comparison, the troupe with a unique accent seemed acceptable. After the opera, the troupe left. The wooden door of the martial arts hall was still tightly closed, but the atmosphere inside the martial arts hall had gradually become solemn. Everyone was silent. After a while, a martial artist suddenly stood up and bowed to Lincoln. "Master Lin, I'm not talented. I have practiced martial arts for many years, but have not made any progress. I have come here to ask for your advice. Please give me some advice." "Why bother?" Lincoln did not even raise his head, and his eyes did not even fall on the martial artist behind him. "You are not very old. Why do you want to die?" "I'm not here to see Master Lin's boxing skills." "Okay." Lincoln nodded, put down the teacup in his hand, and pointed to the stage. "You can use any weapon you want. I will give you another hand." Lincoln's words made the boxer's face change twice, and there was even a hint of resentment in his tone. "Master Lin, you are looking down on me. In a normal sparring, why do I need you to give me a hand?" No, you misunderstood." Lincoln smiled and showed his big white teeth. "I'm just worried that, if I use both hands, I will beat you to death on the stage. In that case, even if we are sparring in martial arts, I will be in trouble." Lincoln did not mention weakness, but every word he said was full of discrimination, causing the martial artist's face to turn red. He was so angry that he wanted to go on stage to compete with Lincoln immediately. It is not a good idea to make enemies with martial artists, but Lincoln does not care. He came to challenge on the opening day of the martial arts school. Even if Lincoln did not know what the rules of this era were, he knew that the martial artist in front of him was provoking him. He did not know whether this was organized by Zhao Rong, but he thought it was almost the same. Zheng Shanao is old and only cares about his own reputation. In recent years, he has not been able to control the martial arts industry as well as he did in his prime. Zhao Rong can rely on her ex-husband's reputation to move around in the martial arts circle, making her influence grow day by day. He does not know what these martial artists are thinking about to target him, but he will let these guys know that targeting is only useful for the weak. Under the stage, quietly watching Lincoln and the other person standing on the stage, a group of martial artists began to whisper. If you ask me, Master Zhao might have been a little impulsive this time. He hastily challenged the new Master Lin without even knowing his moves. I'm afraid he'll suffer a loss. Not necessarily. Another person shook his head. Old Zhao is in his prime, and his skills are genuine. I see that Master Lin is still young, so it's not certain who will win or lose. By the way, why is Master Zhao so impulsive? I heard that his family suffered a change in his early years. Maybe this is because of this? Ah. What's the connection? Then I don't quite understand. Chapter 23 Others practice martial arts, while I practice immortality. People always believe what they want to believe, just like now. Even though they knew that Lincoln, who could get Zheng Shanao to vouch for him, was not simple. Under the influence of many factors such as age and psychology, most of them were optimistic about Master Zhao, not Lincoln. Just as Zheng Shanao said, Xianjin people tolerate Xianjin people. Invisible xenophobia had already begun at this time, but everything was only left in the dark. On the stage, Lincoln and the warrior surnamed Zhao were in opposition. As mentioned before, Lincoln calmly put one hand behind his back, leaving only one hand hanging, and stood still in a posture full of flaws, not taking Master Zhao seriously at all. As if he had noticed this silent contempt, Master Zhao's eyes became sharper. He did not make any move to give in, and picked a weapon that was handy from the shelf full of various weapons. He held the weapon tightly in his palm, which was enough to leave a bloody wound on anyone, and his muscles were tense, and then a burst of force broke out, and the whole person rushed towards Lincoln like an arrow from a bow. Master Zhao took 2 steps at a time, and was close to Lincoln in just a short moment. He moved his wrist slightly, and the sharp blade ruthlessly wiped Lincoln's body. This posture no longer looked like a sparring match, but more like a fight of life and death. Lincoln didn't know what the conflict was between him and the idiot in front of him, but he would never show mercy to someone who wanted to kill him and had already put it into practice. He moved his feet slightly to get rid of the blade that was actually not threatening. Lincoln casually struck with his palm and hit Master Zhao's throat accurately. His breath was cut off, and Master Zhao's movements instantly became stiff. Taking advantage of this short interval, Lincoln kicked him twice in a row on his knees. Crack, two crisp sounds rang out almost at the same time. The people in the audience only felt a flash before their eyes, and Master Zhao's knees had been kicked to pieces. Lincoln's hands continued to move even after his feet were crippled. His palms, like eagle claws, grabbed the arms of Master Zhao from behind. With a little force, there was another crisp sound of bone breaking. The heart-wrenching pain made Master Zhao's face flush instantly. He collapsed to the ground like a ball of mud, roaring from his mouth, but he could no longer utter even a word. Lincoln's previous palm not only cut off his breath, but also broke his ability to speak. With both feet broken, he could only hear and see but not speak. If Master Zhao had the rest of his life, he would be worse than a beggar on the street. Lincoln did not kill Master Zhao, who was ready to kill someone at the slightest disagreement, but this punishment made him feel more uncomfortable than killing him. Give a way out for others, so that they can meet again later? Not true. Not to mention, whether he would come to this world again in the future. Even if he could, the chickens and dogs who came to provoke him before the opening day were not worthy of him leaving a way out. On the stage, pain and despair of a ruined future occupied Master Zhao's heart. His body twitched on the ground, and his anger towards Lincoln had reached an unprecedented level. But at this moment, no one cared about him. Lincoln would not care about him as a defeated opponent, and the martial arts schools below the stage would not care about him either. A disabled person might be set as an example in a short period of time, but in the long run, the only outcome would be suicide. Lincoln's completely ruthless attitude of causing disability made the faces of the people below the stage look bad. Master Zao was indeed inexplicably angry and impulsive, but he was also one of them. A bird that stood out was crippled by others. They were dissatisfied with Master Zao and Lincoln in their hearts. A ceremony that should have been festive ended because of an unfriendly exchange. With Master Zao on the ground, the group hurriedly left without even the thought of drinking a sip of hot tea. The angry faces of the martial arts people made the surrounding people a little curious, but looking at the martial arts school that was open, no one dared to enter. It was not until the afternoon that Zilin hesitantly found this remote martial arts hall with the dollar. Seeing Zilin walk into the dark martial arts hall, Kana, who had been watching from outside, smiled and said to Sunsen beside him, "Look, here comes someone who doesn't know what's good for him." "That's right." Sunsen nodded happily. Everyone in Cheyenne knows about the conflict between this martial arts hall and those individuals. "How dare you enter the martial arts hall? TSK, I'm afraid you won't have a good life in the future." The two of them spoke with some regret, and then hurried back to report the news. "He accepted an apprentice, and a female one. Humph, I thought he was a special person, but it seems that he is no different from those foreign boxers, and he also wants to become famous. Since he can rely on Master Zao to become famous, then we can also rely on him to become famous. Find a time to send a disciple to spar with him. I want to see how he will have the nerve to stay in Cheyenne after his apprentice loses. The time can't be too short or too long. Let's say 3 months later. We will hold a martial arts association in 3 months. This time, we will make him lose face in front of everyone. Have you thought about it?" "I have thought about it." Looking at Lincoln with a smile on his face, Zilin nodded heavily. How many people who can come to Cheyenne from their hometown don't have some ambition in their hearts? Besides, Lincoln doesn't look like a bad person at first glance, which gives Zilin some courage. After a night of thinking, she finally made a decision. "Please teach me. If you want to learn, of course I will teach you." Lincoln took her into the backyard, "But I have to make it clear to you first, my method is not easy to learn, and the process will be very painful. You must persist, and you can only persist." "I understand." "Very good, you have ambition." Lincoln nodded, and then slapped a piece of paper in front of her. "Then start from here. Do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and 10 kilometers of long-distance running every day. Persist for a month first, and see if your physical fitness is up to standard." Yes, of course, letting Zilin exercise is not just for exercise, but mainly there are some things that Lincoln needs to improve. For example, improve the improved version of the magic power again, and by the way, make a new one that ordinary people can bear, based on the super soldier serum. All of these take time, but a month is enough. After a month, the golden string is still not full, and Lincoln has taken the lead in completing the new meditation method of the general version. When Lincoln placed the white paper with the method of magic cultivation in front of Zilin, the inexperienced T-girl was stunned. She carefully read the cultivation method written on the white paper, and then looked at Lincoln stupidly. "Master, isn't this what is written in those novels? Aren't these all fake?" "Of course what they write is fake, but what I write is real," Lincoln said, and lightly tapped his finger in the air. With his powerful control over magic power, golden light suddenly appeared and floated in the air like a thread. He flicked his finger lightly, and the seemingly soft golden thread instantly tightened, and instantly pierced through the bricks and stones in the distance. Looking at the golden light gradually dissipating in Lincoln's hand, and then looking at the bricks and stones in the distance, Zilin was completely dumbfounded. "Zilin, I thought I was here to learn martial arts, but I came to cultivate immortality?" Chapter 24 Exchange Meeting. Of course, what Lincoln taught was not about cultivating immortals. If he was serious, he could even explain the solar magic with scientific principles that had not yet appeared in this era. However, in the eyes of Zilin and even the scientists of this era, this was cultivating immortals, and it was irrefutable. There was no harm in this. On the contrary, Zilin became more loyal and fanatical, so that Lincoln's teaching work became extremely smooth. Everything about magic was brought over by Lincoln from Kamitaj. The library there not only stored spells, but also melee skills. Although Guyi was killed by her good apprentice in the fight, this does not mean that Kamatage's fighting skills are backward. To a certain extent, those fighting skills specially developed for mages can better play Zilin's strengths. At least teaching her mage fighting skills means that Lincoln does not need to spend time to make targeted modifications to martial arts, saving Lincoln a lot of things. Lincoln is not a qualified teacher, not in any aspect. He adopts a free-range teaching method, magic cultivation methods plus some fighting skills, and the rest depends on Zilin to figure out by herself. If she wasn't born to be a mage, she would have wasted her time in this free-range mode. But fortunately, she was the right material, so not only did her time not go to waste, but she became even stronger. The days of training always passed quickly, and more than a month passed quickly. It was still an ordinary day, but it was also a little unusual, because those martial arts schools that had been dormant for several months finally took action. Martial Arts Alliance Exchange Meeting, this is for me. Flipping through the invitation in his hand, Lincoln couldn't help revealing a hint of mockery on his face. Do you think you can't get anything good from me? So you plan to start with the martial arts apprentices? It's a good idea, but what a pity. He was just laughing when Zilin walked in from the yard outside. Master, I have completed my practice today. Lincoln nodded and threw the invitation in his hand out. Done. Then come and take a look at this. Any ideas? What is this? Zilin opened the invitation and took a look, then looked up with a hint of joy. Are we going to compete with them? You got it wrong. They are coming to compete with you. Lincoln corrected, and Zilin immediately understood the meaning. Are they here to challenge us? More like that. How could they do this? Zilin showed a hint of anger on her face. I have only studied for a short 3 months and they are here to challenge us. They are simply too much. They are too much, and we can be too much too. Lincoln pressed his palm and took out a bag of blue powder in Zilin's somewhat puzzled eyes. Master, what is this? Serum. Lincoln smiled calmly. I combined some special things to make a little thing. If you inject this thing, you can greatly enhance your body under the effect of energy. Listening to Lincoln's explanation, Zilin blinked her eyes. She always felt that she seemed to have heard a similar explanation somewhere. Suddenly, she suddenly realized, isn't this the elixir? Seeing Zilin going further and further on the idea of I'm cultivating immortals, Lincoln was a little speechless, but still nodded. It can be considered as it, but there may be a little bit of pain in the process. Are you ready? A little bit of pain? Zilin patted her chest and was full of confidence. Don't worry, I'm absolutely fine. You have backbone. Lincoln gave a thumbs up. Then let's start tonight. Okay. That night, Zilin deeply realized the difference between a little bit and a billion points. Super Soldier Serum can enhance a person in all aspects, from physical fitness to psychological quality. This kind of thing that can make good things better and bad things worse is obviously not what Lincoln wants. The blue powder he made is just a defective substitute. It will not affect the psychology and spirit of the injector. Correspondingly, it will strengthen the physical fitness of the injector much less than the original. But even so, it is enough to strengthen Zilin's physical fitness to the level of a professional athlete who has trained for many years. This is enough. After the strengthening is completed, Zilin began to get familiar with her body after her strength skyrocketed. Lincoln returned the invitation, not refusing, but agreeing. Martial Arts Alliance. Looking at the invitation on the sandalwood table, a martial artist laughed. He actually agreed. I thought it would take some effort, but I didn't expect it. At this time, another martial artist spoke up. Everyone, although this exchange meeting has other purposes, it is also the largest provincial capital of Xianjin martial arts in recent years. I think that this exchange meeting can not only target Master Lin, but also bring out any talent concepts of your martial arts school. It is not advisable to work behind closed doors. More exchanges are the right way. What do you think? Brother Zeng's side, this exchange meeting is a good thing. If it becomes famous, it will also be good for Brother Zeng. Then it's settled. Let's get together and have a good exchange. By the way, let Master Lin from outside know what the rules of Xianjin are. The exchange meeting is a big festival for the martial arts industry, but its influence is often limited to the martial arts industry. The dirty things against Lincoln must be hidden and cannot be put on the surface, and those martial arts exchanges must not be seen by those outside who have not paid to learn boxing. Therefore, this is destined to be a grand event in the circle. After enduring those meaningless speeches and singing, everyone in the audience was shocked. The exchange meeting finally came to the important part that everyone had planned for a long time, the martial arts competition. Before others could make any moves, Lincoln stood up first, standing on the stage and looking down at the crowd below. You all think today is a good day, and I think so too. It just so happens that today's main theme is very suitable. My suggestion is that today's competition should be changed into a ring match. One person defends the ring, and the others challenge. Each family can send 3 people. Whoever can stand to the end will be the winner. As the initiator, I'm willing to let my disciples go on stage to defend the ring first. You can send your martial arts disciples to challenge. What do you think? Lincoln on the stage smiled, as if he would not participate in the rest of the activities if you disagree. The people in the audience hesitated for a while, and some were not sure what Lincoln was thinking, but the temperament of martial artists finally made them nod their heads. Since Master Lin has an idea, then let's do it according to Master Lin's idea. It's also a good opportunity for Master Lin to see the strength of my Xianjin martial arts school. Thanks to Wulian Gatling Xianzhen for the reward of 100 starting coins. Chapter 25. Speed is the only way to success. Chen Shi did not come to the exchange meeting because he did not want the Xianjin martial arts community to see his intention to open a martial arts school locally. Zheng Shanao did not come to the exchange meeting either because Lincoln had already informed him in advance, asking him not to come and hinder the nature of those martial arts communities targeting him. And in the entire city of Xianjin, only the 2 of them knew Lincoln's true strength, and the rest of the martial arts community could not have imagined or guessed Lincoln's true strength. After practicing martial arts for many years, everyone in the martial arts community knew the limits of the human body and could not have imagined that a cultivator would suddenly appear in this stable world. So, when the young-looking Zilin stood on the stage on behalf of Lincoln's martial arts school and waited for the first challenger, everyone in the audience laughed. Lincoln laughed because he knew there was going to be a good show to watch. Everyone in the martial arts community laughed because they also knew there was going to be a good show to watch. It's just that the show that both sides wanted to watch was not the same show. Zilin was on the stage, ready for battle. Everyone in the audience was silent for a while. Finally, a young man who looked no more than a teenager stood up and said, "Bagua Zhang Li Fei, please teach me." Zilin looked at Li Fei, who was posing in the starting position. Just as she was about to throw out a magic whip, she heard Lincoln's voice in her ear, "Don't show it, otherwise no one will be willing to go on stage." Zilin was slightly startled, and then nodded imperceptibly. On the opposite side, looking at Zilin's completely non-defensive posture, Li Fei felt a little angry, and sneered in his heart, "You look down on me, I'll make you pay later." The next moment, he exerted force on his feet and rushed forward in a flowing manner, intending to hit Zilin with all his palm power. Li Fei kept rehearsing the next moves in his mind. He seemed to see the scene of himself defeating Zilin with a set of combos, but the next moment, the fantasy was shattered. Whoosh! It was as if a phantom passed by in front of his eyes. Li Fei, who had always been a phantom of others, was stunned. The next moment, a palm lightly pressed on his abdomen. Bang! In the muffled sound, everyone seemed to see a layer of shockwave spreading out. The piercing pain spread throughout his body. Li Fei couldn't help but open his mouth. Saliva overflowed, and his body fell heavily to the ground. Looking at Li Fei, who had no strength to fight on the ground, Zilin calmly took 2 steps back and looked at the people below the stage. "Does this count as my victory?" No one spoke because everyone was stunned. Li Fei, who was in the game, couldn't see clearly, but they, the bystanders, saw it clearly. Sliding steps, heavy palms, ordinary, without any skills worth praising. But it was this simple and unpretentious move that defeated Li Fei in an instant, faster than everyone expected. Fake, right? The apprentices of Baghua's Hang Martial Arts Hall were a little confused. Although Li Fei's martial arts are not as good as the senior brother, he is also one of the best. How could he lose like this? Li Fei's quick defeat had already made the master of Baghua's Hang Hall look ugly. At this time, he heard the whispers of the apprentices behind him, and his eyes couldn't stop twitching. What are you doing? Why don't you go up and take him down? Don't you think it's not embarrassing enough? The apprentices woke up, as if from a dream, and hurriedly stepped forward to drag Li Fei down. But one person stayed on the stage. Baghua's Hang, Zalke, please teach me. Zilin blinked and pointed at Li Fei under the stage. You and him. Zalke's face was not good either. Li Fei, he respectfully calls me senior brother. I have to stand up for him. Zilin nodded, which was regarded as approval. She pointed to the shelf beside her. Do you want to take a weapon? Zalke's face twitched twice. No, I practice palm, not weapons. Palm. That's pretty good too. Zilin couldn't help rubbing the palm that had just knocked Li Fei down. The feeling of hitting someone with your hand is really special. You. Zalke showed a trace of anger in his eyes, but he endured it. Can we start? Of course, anytime. Zilin nodded. Zalke didn't say anything, just started with a similar starting posture as Li Fei, and rushed towards Zilin. Whoosh. Bang. Quietly retreating 2 steps. To avoid Zalke's saliva on the ground, Zilin raised her head with an innocent face. Next, is it the next one? The most proud disciple of the sect was knocked down by a palm, and then carried off the stage like a dead body. The face of the master of the Bagua Palm Hall was not much better than that of the corpse. If it weren't for the fact that the exchange meeting was jointly initiated by them, he would have even thought of leaving directly at this time. There was competition between martial arts schools. Seeing that the Baghua's Hang student couldn't even last 3 moves, the people from other martial arts schools laughed and said, Master Zal, there is only 1 spot left. Don't just go in casually. Let's try it out first. Even though they had seen how Zilin defeated the Baghua's Hang apprentice so easily, no one was optimistic about Lincoln's apprentice. It was because of his skills. Years of martial arts training taught them that humans have their limits, so they would also be infinitely superstitious about the importance of skills in a fight. Zilin didn't show any desperate physical fitness or skills during the fight, which always gave them an illusion. An illusion that, if I just try harder, I might be able to defeat her. Zimenkun Wujui, please teach me. A young man with a crew cut clasped his fist slightly, then stepped on his feet and stood still, waiting for Zilin to attack first. Wu Jiui could see clearly from below that Li Fei and Zalke were defeated because they showed flaws when attacking. Since Zilin was good at finding flaws, he should just defend and wait for Zilin to show flaws and end the competition in one fell swoop. Wu Jiui's idea was very good. The defensive posture made the martial artists and the audience nod slightly. Judging from the current posture, even they would find it difficult to find weaknesses. In this way, even if they could not win in one fell swoop, they could force out some tricks. At that time, it would be easy to win by combining the strengths of all the families. Looking at Wu Jiui, who looked like a turtle, Zilin did not speak, but just took a few steps forward and then stretched out her palm. Bang! Her movements were so fast that the cuffs exploded in the air with a muffled sound. Wu Jiui's eyes were full of fear. He felt that he could clearly see the palm hitting his abdomen, but his body was as slow as a rusty machine. When he felt that his body could be controlled, a piercing pain spread throughout his body. With a plop, he fell on the ground on the saliva that had not yet dried. At this moment, everyone's face changed. Fast. Very fast. Everyone had only this one adjective to describe Zilin's technique. Suddenly, they thought of the words in martial arts novels that they disdained. There is nothing in the world of martial arts that is invincible except speed. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.